All right, good evening, everyone. We will begin the March 19th, 2026 work session for the Williamson County Board of Education. Thanks to everyone for being here. Let's first take a look at the consent agenda. Only 2 items on the consent agenda for this upcoming meeting on Monday. Any questions about either of those items? Okay, we will vote on those as written on Monday night. Now move into our superintendent's report. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, board members. On the agenda, we have a screen time committee update presentation, and as I think the board members know, our chair, Mr. Brown, had actually mentioned to you all that we anticipated, because we were talking budget and a couple of other significant items, that there was a possibility the meeting could run long, and so based on the feedback he received from you, we are taking that off the agenda. We'll give you an update in April. For those of you working on the screen time committee, thank you for that work. One of the discussion points we had related to that is let's make sure we do it right rather than be driven specifically by a timetable, but let the timetable be a guide. We'll give you some more details related to that in April for the work they're doing. I did want to give you a couple of brief updates. No presentations in my superintendent's report. But I did want to let you all know that I've had a request from a board member this week to give you an update on the library book structure and the policies that we put in place this year, the parent opt-outs, the immature reading list, et cetera, and we will give you an update on that in the next week by memo, and then we will talk about that at the April work session and give you an update on the progress that's gone on this past year related to that. We gave you some numbers at the beginning of the school year related to those families who had opted out, but we will make sure that we give you that update through the work that the librarians have been doing this year based on that law covering that. Also, I did want to mention to you that last year the state passed a law that certain threats that required outside law enforcement intervention would prompt a quarterly report related to them. Want to let you know the third quarter just ended right before spring break last week. We actually had 0 threats that fit within that definition. We had 0 threats that fit that definition in the second quarter. We had 3 right at the beginning of the school year. I think the last one was September 17th. And so we hope and believe that the proactive interventions of our school administrators and our safety department, I know Mike Fletcher is here, that constant work, that constant vigilance is keeping that managed. But we also know that, especially when it comes to safety, you cannot ever take your eye off it. It takes constant attention and constant work. So, Mr. Fletcher, since you're here, I did want to specifically thank you for the work that you're leading and doing that. I tell you all, that's a constant worry of all of us, because you have that worry no matter what we do, might there be something. And so we constantly encourage families and students to let us know if they hear something. Almost to the point where that if you see something, say something, phrases become trite, but there's value in that because that idea is in folks' head. We actually had one email that we sent the board earlier this week about a particular incident where a student recognized something, just a discussion that was going on even outside of school that made them uncomfortable, and that gave an opportunity for parents to be aware and some appropriate interventions to be in place. Third, I did want to mention to you that we do have a committee working on the America 250 celebration, and that committee continues its work. They actually have another meeting scheduled in April, but I want to give you just a brief thumbnail sketch of some of the things that they're working on. We're working on having a kickoff celebration late this school year, pretty much after TCAP and after the end of course exams, to let our students and our families know as they head into the summer that there are going to be some pretty great events going on during the summer for July 4th, et cetera. I know, Ms. Hibma, you and I mentioned that we remembered 1976 when we were in elementary school. Those celebrations, we hope, will stick with students. So there will be some grab-and-go activities late this school year for students to celebrate our 250th anniversary. In the fall, some of the brainstorming items they're working on, including opening game halftime shows involving our celebration, potentially some things related to uniforms that we'll celebrate as well, in-game recognitions as well. There has been a logo that has been approved by this committee, just that we'll add in to particular celebrations over the course of this year, especially in the fall. We also have been working on some arts events, choir events, a focus on the America's 250 celebration on those key dates that we're going to see in the fall, including 9/11. Including Veterans Day. And so it's a really good work that's going on right now. So I felt like it was worth telling you all that committee is making some good progress on those plans. Again, Mr. Chair, I told everyone it'd be brief. Certainly if you have any questions about what's going on as we have transitioned now to the fourth quarter, certainly open to any questions you all may have.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from Mr. Golden? Okay. That might officially be the shortest superintendent's report of all time. Operations report, Mr. King.
I'll one-up Mr. Golden. I don't have any updates this month, but if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Well, we're on a roll here. Can we add the screen time back? Just kidding. All right, we will move to the board chair report, and I don't have any report, but I know Ms. Hibma is prepared to give us an update on some of the legislative activities that are happening in Nashville.
Yes. So this afternoon, I talked to Senator Johnson's office, and the Senate Bill 328, which is about enrollment from outside enrollment into the district, that was passed in the Senate, but there was an amendment to the language, and that's the important part that I'd like to share with everyone this evening. Okay, so what it does, it requires that the school identify what their capacity is. So the school district itself gets to choose the criteria for what they deem is capacity in the individual school. So that gives us some autonomy on that. And you can use your own metric. For example, class size, so that you don't have to worry that you have to enlarge your class size if we have stipulations on the class sizes for different grades. I put down requires have a process for having an open enrollment period, which we already do, with the regular, district enrollment. We can also charge tuition for students that are out of county as well. And then there's 4 reasons to deny a non-resident student for enrollment. And the first one is because we just do not have the space available. That the student does not fit the criteria for participation because they've been expelled or they have a history of poor behavior. And then number 4 doesn't really apply to us, but in some areas there's a desegregation plan where you have to have a certain ratio of different ethnicities in a school. So that was one bill that I know had a lot of attention from our district and from board members. So I hope that, and so that was just passed in the Senate part. So we still have to, the House hasn't, but it looks like it's going to pass. So, but I hope those amendments will make everyone feel more comfortable about what's going on with that.
Tanya, before you move on to the next one, with those amendments, what is your thinking about that bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have not seen the proposed amendments, but I will tell you, generally speaking, it concerns me. I will tell you there's another law that puts a cap on the tuition that we can charge.
Oh.
And it's limited It's limited to the local share. So it does make me wonder. There has been some discussion, and I've had some discussion with Representative Reeves, who's on the K-12 subcommittee in the House, and you know, of course, bills are considered at both the House level and Senate level, and he had told me that they were working on evaluating that related to which TISA funding follows the student. Is TISA funding based on how they run the formula for us, or is it based on where the student comes from? And as of our last conversation, that question had not been resolved. The discipline piece that I saw did speak specifically to expulsion, but our open zoning policy and rule allows a principal to return to school based on rules violations. So if someone is out of zone within Williamson County, they violate the school rules, they can get returned to their zone school. The piece I saw did not give that much discretion. It was expulsion that would render the student not able to stay. So just generally speaking, I have some concerns related to that. You know, we've made it a point, especially in the last few years after the state passed the law requiring open zoning when you had capacity, to open as much as we possibly could. You may recall our discussion last month and the month before about high schools especially, where some of our high schools were very close to capacity, and yet we intentionally opened some space because we wanted to give students choice. We're going to have to evaluate if this law passes both houses, on both branches, and gets approval by the executive branch. We're going to have to look closely at that and what we do long term. From a numbers perspective, in the aggregate, the practicality looks to be a challenge from my perspective, because it allows you to set numbers, and we do that based on building capacities. But when you hit a certain point in a particular school with a per pupil, we do need to add a teacher under the state regs. And so we're going to have to evaluate how many students might be coming in from out of county compared to how many might be transferring from another school, and it has the potential to add some complexity to it. That it's that proverbial devil's in the details.
So it sounds as if what she was describing on that, the autonomy to set the thresholds on class size and so forth, that theoretically if that additional child from out of county triggered a new class, that we could say no.
Potentially, but we also have move-ins.
Right.
Right, so where's the line, when is the line? So that the logistics of that may be tough.
Yeah.
I will say the original version of the bill included that discretion to limit. I'm just struggling with how we compare our open zoning internally to that.
I think Donna was first, and then you have a question?
I did, and then I found the answer, but I thought I would share with you guys. The House bill is 0349, if y'all want to track it on the website. So,
And I tell you, I got to say this: Representative Reeves is asking all the right questions in the research he is doing. So I want you all to know publicly, I appreciate the work he's been doing, asking questions about it.
Has anyone talked about exceptional student athletes, school shopping, or the students with IEPs coming into our system?
I haven't heard any discussion about that, but Mr. Cook, you may follow up behind me. As I understand it, there's no legal way. If you open it up to differentiate between one or the other, that has to be neutral.
Okay, any other questions on that one? Okay, you want to go ahead?
Okay, sure. There's it's called the Ten Commandment Bill, but it's actually a bill that has the founding documents on it. That one did pass in the House on February 12th, and the Senate status that I'm aware of is it's still in Education Committee that was sent there on the 11th, but it's been deferred for now. We talked about open enrollment, and then, I'm looking on the back side. There's the Tennessee Religious Freedom Act, which is Senate Bill 1957 and House Bill 1834. And that one allows the Board of Education to include prayer in their public meeting. And that passed the Senate 32-0, and it's been placed on the calendar on 3/17 for the House Education Admin Committee. And so that one looks like it has movement. The presidential fitness test, that has passed. And then the other bill that protecting religious liberty and expression in the public schools, that one is moving forward. There's a lot of components to that one, but it's still, it hasn't, it's moving, but nothing's been voted on and things like that. And then the one for the IEP services, that one, okay, that one is House Bill 2327, and the Senate bill is 2055. So that one is talking about special education services, and the proposed legislation requires LEAs and public charter schools to allow a private pay provider who is under contract with a parent or legal guardian of a student with autism spectrum disorder or developmental delays who is enrolled in the LDA or public charter school access to the student during the school day to provide the student with private pay services. And one of my concerns was like background checks and things like that for that individual. And so the proposed legislation requires a private pay provider to comply with background investigation requirements and to provide proof of licensure, certification, and insurance to the LEA or public charter school before providing any services on school premises. Another concern I had was that if, and this is, I believe it's in addition to the regular IEP that the student would already get. So this is an additional service during the school day, so it would pull them out of their regular classes. So that was kind of an issue that arose from that. So I don't know if you have any questions or comments about this particular one.
You've touched on that concern about pullouts and scheduling, right?
Yeah.
Because of the precision that our teams work on in scheduling student services. So if that passes, my impression is it will prompt the discussion that would include that provider as well about when's the appropriate time. Every student's unique, right? And so their services and the timing of their services are generally mapped out. So that has the potential to just add one more discussion point.
Then we have an interesting bill, the immigration status bill. The Senate bill passed earlier in the session, and the House bill passed on March 16th, 70-25. But, okay, but this one here, but there's two different versions. That's what the interesting part was. So they're competing versions. So the House is strictly a data collection version, and the Senate, that version is stricter with language that could authorize school districts to refuse to enroll undocumented students or charge full tuition. So what they're going to be doing now is the bills are heading to a conference committee where members of both chambers will try to compromise. So anyway, those are the bills that I highlighted for tonight. So any other questions on anything?
Thanks for following those and doing the research. Any comments or questions from anyone on the board or Mr. Golden? Any feedback on any of those from a district perspective?
I don't have anything additional.
All right, thank you again, Tanya. Okay, we'll move on to new business and several items here for Ms. Farmer to walk us through on the budget. Let me just say at the outset, thank you. As always, this is a lot of work. We say this every year, but it's a lot of work. And you've been consistently over the past few months giving us updates and previews and preparing us for this, so we're grateful. And let you take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would volunteer to continue the trend if y'all want to make this the fastest budget. We can do that too. No, thank you for your kind words, but I get to be the voice of the budget, but There are so many people that are working on this and have worked so tirelessly. So thanks to everybody. And we are going to dive in. What you have on the table in front of you, you will have an updated copy of the budget, but then there is also a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm going to present so that you can take notes, or I didn't want you to have to worry about trying to take a picture or that kind of thing. But we will also email it to you when this is over, so you'll have a digital copy as well. We're going to go through the packet that you have in front of you, section by section. The very first few pages are just a summary with the high points, and we're going to cover most of those in this conversation tonight. So feel free to look back over that. But again, we'll hit most of those. The first section, starting on page 5, that we'll look at is enrollment. Not a lot's changed since February in this regard, and so we're still looking at a reduction from actual first month to what we're projecting for the school year. And again, we use these numbers as we're looking at our staffing standards and how we actually hire our staff. So that's why this matters. Does anyone have any questions on that page 5?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may add to that, you see those numbers, the K-12 current to K-12 projected is actually 22 students different, slight decrease. The pre-K and early childhood current, just as a reminder, we use acronyms. Dr. Driggers, I know you've spoken to acronyms. Pre-K is voluntary pre-K. It's a program that we have for students based on some qualifications that the state has. Our EC is our early childhood program, which you often hear referred to as special education pre-K. So that one is a tougher number to project based on a process that the state calls Child Find, where they identify students with disabilities, children with disabilities, actually at age 3. So we start serving children with disabilities at age 3, and that 555 number represents some of those. You can see that 730 now is current. The moment a child reaches the age of 3, we have that responsibility to serve. So that number tends to go up over the course of the school year and finish at a higher number, a substantially higher number than when we started, because of those 3-year-olds reaching the age of 3. So go ahead, Rachel.
If we have no questions on that, we'll move on to personnel. Staffing standards are on pages 7 through 9. There was only one small tweak to the staffing standard, and it's on the bottom of page 7, related to strings, where it was added that if enrollment reaches 1,400 at a school, it goes from a 0.5 to a 1.0 for strings, and that was the only change in the staffing standard. So I didn't put a slide in related to it. But if you have questions on the staffing standards, please feel free to ask them.
Once again, I want to mention one item just to call your attention to this. You see the staffing standard reduction on general ed elementary school teachers. We have seen the trend these last few years of a slight increase in high school and middle school numbers with a decrease in elementary, and that number reflects that. The high school reduction is actually based on a refocus on staffing standards. That it's four gen ed high school teachers among 11 high schools, so it's not a statistically significant number. But that 22.8 elementary school teacher number does reflect that reduction in enrollment.
Can you speak to how many of these reductions are actual people versus just on paper?
If I may, Ms. Hall, if you would speak to that.
Thank you. We don't anticipate that it will be people just because of natural attrition. And so we're working through that process now based on the draft PCR.
There we go. These staffing standards, and like, how were these generated? Is this from a school board policy? Did a previous, like, I just don't know where they came from.
Yeah, it's a combination. Part of it is state requirements in the regs.
Okay.
For example, the elementary school, those numbers are strictly based, the elementary teachers strictly based on state regs. And it's been based, the additional ones that are not particularly state regs are based over time on us identifying needs. For example, counseling standards, there have been some times over the years where those have changed. So we actually, if I'm not mistaken, you all did not propose any changes this year to the staffing standards, largely because of budget, and we did not identify a need. So it's a combination of requirements plus evaluation. Generally speaking, the assistant principal ratios are us, that we've made some recommendations over the years for that. And librarians actually happen to be a state requirement, so it does vary from spot to spot for that document.
Once you get past the staffing standards on pages 10 through 13 is the summary of what we call the PCR, which is the position control report. And again, this is all of the full-time equivalent positions that we have that are budgeted for are represented in this document. And what you see on the screen in front of you and what Mr. Golden was already referring to are we had reductions and then we also had additions. And so on the third page of that summary, you'll get to the net effect. But we had staffing standard reductions, but then we also, when we came back after February and had serious conversations about budget, one of the items that Mr. Golden challenged us to think about was that if we had a position that became unfilled or was currently unfilled, did we need to rehire it? Could we look at taking those duties assigned to those particular individuals and reallocating them out to other staff that we already had on our books? And so that's what you see on the right side is reduction in personnel. Other was where we had or are expecting to have an opening, and we have elected to not.
To use vernacular, I said something along the lines of, if we've been getting by without this position, can we continue to get by without it? Lose an assistant principal. Let's see. I think that was based on the staffing standard, that in the aggregate, a school dropped below one of the lines on our staffing standard, and another school did not go up by that same amount.
I'm sorry, for assistant principals, we actually had a one in unassigned that we brought
thank you.
down.
Okay, I
So
could not
that's
remember.
the one.
Okay.
The second slide you see then are the additions, and it's the same additions related to staffing standards on the left, and then true additions this year that were for new needs or new things. And we've talked a lot about the Innovation Center and the excitement we have behind it, and knew that we were going to need to staff that. And so what you see in those additions are 5 staff members related to the Innovation Center. Then we also have a transition teacher to be added. And then there's the need, there was growth related to special ed bus needs, and so to attendance. So those are the new positions that were not related, again, to the staffing standards. So the net effect ended up being a total reduction of 28.9 positions, full-time positions. FTE is a full-time equivalent, but that's the positions. Do we have any questions on that? Once you get past the summary, there is the detail by school, and that's what our principals are chomping at the bit to be able to see, because then that lets them know what that staff requirements are going to look like for them. Just something to think about. I know within retirement, we have a person that helps go through that retirement process, and she's been meeting with people, and so at this point, we already have over 100 retirees. So speaking back to what Ms. Hall was saying, we're not looking at actually losing people through attrition. We should be able to make those adjustments.
And just as a reminder also, the document we gave you answering board member questions included some rates. I think that one of the questions was related to the teacher retention rate. I think we're at 90% this past year. So when you factor those numbers in with retirements and moves, you all anticipate that each one of those ought to be covered.
Can you guys, for historical purposes, go back to last year's budget and what the year-over-year reduction in FTEs was, so we can just kind of see over cumulatively over 2 years what's happening with our net reduction and
Rachel, you're going to look it up.
It was right at 36, but I'll look it up for sure.
okay. So roughly 65, reduction of 65 FTEs over 2 years, kind of commensurate with that flat or lack of growth.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I was wrong. It was 34.6. So that was the actual number. Close enough. Anything else we want to talk about on the PCR, the position control report?
Just as a reminder also, and I'm going to probably say that multiple times, I already have tonight, about 85–86% of our budget is people. Is that pretty close?
We're
Rachel?
going to have a slide on that, but
Oh,
yes,
okay,
sir.
sorry. I'm jumping the gun. Go ahead.
Okay, we're going to now move on into the general purpose school fund, the meat of it. And that begins on page 34 in your packet. Revenue, we haven't talked about revenue because we didn't really know a lot of information. And so I'm going to very briefly hit the big buckets. Sales tax, we are on track with the 3% that we estimated this year. And so we're using that same as our go-to for next year, a 3% increase over actual for this year. And that would give us an additional 4.3 in revenue. Property tax, following the same thought process, and is a 1% increase over this year. And again, this is a little bit better number than what we had in February. I was able to the county got the next update, and the numbers were a little bit better. And so that gave us an additional increase over last year of $3.6 million. TISA was the one we really had no information on when we met in February. And we did get our first full estimate. And based on that estimate, we would have additional funds of $3.9 million coming in from TISA. And I have a slide that I want to show you on that in just a second. So overall, our revenue over last year would be an increase of $12.3 million. And so we're looking at total budgeted revenue of $526 million. And the other things, this is the bulk of it, which when I go through the rest of the slides, you'll see why I'm saying that. But those are the big chunks that you see in front of you. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. So when we got the estimate for TISA, I will be sending you the letter so you have it and can send you each letter as we get them. They did increase the actual base, and that was the piece that we weren't sure of. So at the top, where it says amount weight, 7,530, that was what the base increased to this year. As a comparative last year, and when I say last year, this is the year we're currently in, but budgeting purposes, it was 7,295. And so that's why I was able to come back and increase that number.
So Rachel, I want to emphasize and reemphasize that base, 7,530, is not received by us.
It is not.
This document is misleading in that it talks about the base amount. That predates all the reductions in the divisions based on state share versus local share, fiscal capacity, et cetera. But it is their starting point on per pupil.
And that's what you see on the rest of the screen. The very top is the base. It's on the first page of the letter. The second half or section, large section there is later in the letter that you'll get a copy of. And it does show the actual calculation. And so that's that 30-70 split. Again, this is not 30-70 between the state and Williamson County. It's cumulative. It's statewide. The state's going to cover 70% for everything for the state, and then the counties are expected to cover 30%. And because of our physical capacity being higher, we cover more than our actual percentage of students that we have. And so that's that 6.74 that you see in section 2. That number for physical capacity, if there's a change to it, we will not actually get that number probably until May at the earliest. It could be, April at the earliest, it could be May. So we're just going with what we had based off of the letter that we received. So there could be changes. There could be changes up or down either way. But the bulk of the difference was that base increase from 72.95 to 75.30. If you carried it out, I put over on the side to give you an idea of $299 million. comparative to 305, so you would think, oh, we're going to get $6.5 more million. It's really, once you do go through the whole calculation, it's more, it's a little bit under $4 million. And that just kind of gives you an idea of what that 70-30 split in the fiscal capacity does.
So the key number that Rachel uses in this particular document that she will forward to you, and again, that they update from time to time as their projections change, is that second to last number, that state funding excluding post-secondary tests. That's what she bases her state revenue on.
And so when you're also looking at that down at the bottom, then that current year, your total is $325 million. We know that our budget is nowhere close to 300. I mean, it costs a whole lot more than $325 million to actually fund what we do or what any school does. Not just our district. This is the way it is for everybody, but that's why.
So to give you an, sorry.
I said just many of the local, that's why our local, they pay a whole lot more than what's on this.
To give you an idea of that, our per pupil expenditure that the state gives us reports on hovers around the 50th percentile statewide. And if I'm not mistaken, we're around 12,500 to 13,000 per pupil.
That's the last we have. They have not posted the newest. I looked today.
That was last year's number. The base was in the $7,000 range, and the average per pupil expenditure was in the $12,000 to $13,000 range statewide.
So Jason, are we talking about special ed? Do we have that in the presentation? I can save it till later. I just want to talk about, because average isn't like.
Thank you for that. So Rachel, I'm going to ask you to put some detail on that based on Mr. Galbraith's question. This particular document shows base and weights. Special education services are included in weights based on unique learning needs. So Rachel, can you speak to that?
I can, and I don't have a slide that shows it. You'll see it in the letter. So there's 10 unique learning needs. There's also economically disadvantaged and impoverished that come into that calculation. And what this particular, what you can see is that weights funds generated, that column, that's related to those unique learning needs. And honestly, when you go through and you look at what's the total in their calculation of, hey, this is what you should get related to special education, what we actually end up getting is that local contribution total that says 34.9 million. That is about what's calculated in that formula of what before the 70-30 split. So
that's before the split, though.
That's
So
before the split.
So after the split, we get $10 million.
Right.
And I know I'd like to talk about that. I just want to, before we move on, I just want to make sure that, like, just hold in your mind, we get $10 million from the state for
related to special education.
And is there, but that's all the weights. That's not just special ed.
Correct.
So
that has a few other things in it.
and is there, the federal dollars are not on this slide, right?
It is not.
Okay.
And so within the general purpose budget, you'll see about $1 million worth of federal that's not necessarily related to special education. Some of it is, but not all of it. We have a separate fund that is our 142 federal funds, and this year was about $10 million in total what we received through federal related to special education. Anything else we want to talk about TISA right now? So this slide just kind of gives you, again, an overall feel for the state versus local versus federal, what's in the general purpose budget, and then other. So as you can see, again, the local percentage is 63%. The state is a little bit higher this year than what it's been. We normally run 66, 65, 33, somewhere in there. It's higher, but that's because that base went up on for TISA. And so federal, again, it was such a small number. It was 0.29% is why it's showing a 0. And then other comes into, that may be rebates we get, it could be donations we get, it could be the fees that we're charging for facility use. Like, that's the revenue when you see that 2.8 million. But that's, in a nutshell, the pieces of the pie related to our revenue.
I just wanted to ask to confirm the earlier conversation about the outside enrollment bill. So I think that's what you were saying, Mr. Golden, about when we understand how much money we would get for those students is which local are we considering? How much we get per student or how much they get in their home county?
That's right.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to understand.
And generally speaking, because of the fiscal capacity formula, we receive less
Less here.
per student
Okay.
compared to most counties.
Right, definitely our surrounding counties.
I'm trying to remember MMPS, they're affected by the fiscal
The fiscal
capacity as
capacity
well.
does. They're
Very
pro-
similar to our impact.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So statistically speaking, they're in that same boat as us.
Okay.
It's the same, it's gonna be them, it's gonna be Sevier County, Knox County, Shelby County. Those areas tend to have a higher fiscal capacity, just because they're the metro areas, which would make sense.
But the other ones, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Rachel, are you ready? You getting ready to move on to the expense
I
side?
was.
Okay, let me just give you all a preface related to this. So when we presented our draft February projections, we projected a $39 or so million gap at the time, based on the information we had before Rachel adjusted revenues based on new information, and we made some cuts that we presented to you about 2 weeks ago with this budget that you're looking at today. A portion of that, well, that gap has basically shrunk to $20.1 million. So $19 or so million shrink. Part of that is based on her projecting increased revenues. Part of that's on the expenses. So as we close out the revenue portion, Rachel, can you give an estimate of how that gap is closed with an increase on the revenue side?
Yes, sir, and there will be a little bit. Let's come back over here. I had a slide on it that actually shows. So our additions to revenue totaled 3.8 million. So that's the difference in just revenue that you can see from the February budget to March.
And that's from bumping up property tax and sales tax projections.
Correct.
And the
Little
increase
tweaks,
and
yeah.
the percentage increase in TISA.
TSM, all the
Okay.
little tweaks.
Thanks.
Okay, we're ready to move on into expenses. So this slide was in your February packet. I'm just putting it back in here. So when you're reviewing on page 34, you have 4 columns listed: last year actual, current year original. So this is the budget you approved. Current year original will be the budget you approved. And then current year revised budget. Why do we have revised? And most of it is related to grants or funds that we got from the state. So I just wanted you to understand how we got from 562 to 585 in those 2 columns. And again, we talked about that, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time. I just wanted to remind you. To get to the meat of it, we've always talked about the operational expenses versus personnel expenses in total. And so we break that down into those 2 major buckets. And so operational expense wise, in 25-26, you're seeing at the top, this was the budget for last year, a total of 562. 81 million of that was related to operations. And so in this year's budget, we came through and we've cut 4.2 million out of operations to get down to proposed 77 in operations. Same thing looking at personnel, we started at 480. We're going to have the experience roll each year, so that's that 4.1 million, and that's both professional and classified. And then the raise that the county proposed, so let's go back to that and just remind you, when the budget committee met for the county, they gave a few directives, one of which was to include a 4% raise for all employees, one of which was to reduce, for the county departments, reduce their operations by 5%, which we don't technically have to do, but we try to follow. They also said the same thing: if you have unfilled positions, reevaluate those. And so those were the same things that we looked at when we went through. And so to give you an idea, that 81 million that was last year, if we reduced it by 5%, that would have been 4,099,851. What we actually did when we finished was we were at a reduction of 5.14%. So we've met that requirement. Even though we weren't required to, we felt like that was the right thing to do in coming back to the commission, because we knew, and Mr. Golden has made it clear, we can't do that raise if we don't get additional revenue. He said it from the beginning, and so we wanted to do everything we can to show in good faith we're trying to follow what you're telling us to do. So going back then to Mr. Golden's statement earlier, operations this year is 13.66%, and then personnel is 86.34. So a little bit of shift. Last year it was more 85-15, and we're now looking 86-14. Thinking about that, I want to go on, and we're going to talk a lot about expenses. I'm not going to breeze through this, but I do want you to keep in mind too. I said we cut $4.2 million out of operations in total, but y'all, we also added $5 million in textbooks. We had to liability insurance and content insurance on our buildings, and that's something that the county through risk management does for us. We don't negotiate those prices. We've had to increase it, and then we had the innovation center, which it's going to come with cost. Anything new comes with those costs. So we added that on top of those cuts. So a lot of work, truly a lot of work went into that. So the next question to me was obviously, what are those, what does that look like? What are we cutting? And
Rachel, let me just reemphasize that. That 4.2 million is a net reduction, even with those increases.
even with those increases.
We didn't just cut $4.2 million
Right.
out of our operations budgets. We cut substantially more than that because we knew we had those additional expenses coming.
And I think I need to, tell y'all, me saying it, but think about what I'm saying. When we left the meeting last month, we knew we couldn't come back in here and say, okay, we need $39 million. So what this looked like for us was getting in Mr. Golden's office together for days, and we literally went back through the entire budget line by line. And you may want to say it yourself, but I'll say what he told us is he's like, is it mission critical? Is this something that we have to have? Does this directly impact students? And then is there anything that we can postpone or we can push off? And we went through line by line. So when I said I'm not going to breeze through this is literally everything. I'm fixing to throw some things up here. Y'all, there are hundreds of things that we went through and cut. And every department, and this is from transportation to HR to special ed to maintenance to finance, I mean, all across the board, we went back through and said, is it mission critical, and how is this directly impacting our students? And can we back off? You go, okay, well, they didn't need it. Wrong. I mean, I cannot say that enough. I will get fired up about this one. That is wrong. We needed all of these things. But our priority was we want to make sure we're doing right by our kids.
So a couple of examples, and Dr. Driggers actually has a question. I'll save my examples. Go ahead.
Before we get too far from slide 10, on the Innovation Center and the Entrepreneur Center, how much money do we get from donations, grants, corporations? Do we get any money to help with that?
We have gotten some because Dr. Qualls, for the last year, and Chris Schneider for the last year or so have been seeking that help. So we've gotten some in-kind donations from some corporations. We've entered into some partnerships with corporations. And those of you who visited the ribbon cutting or the
Groundbreaking.
Thank you. I had to do the
It's just charades.
Thank you. The groundbreaking had specific corporations mentioned, so we have gotten a lot of that. That helps fill in some gaps. Dr. Qualls, do you have any numbers off the top of your head?
This doesn't count against my budget time.
I can't get it to work. Is this working? Okay. Thank you for the question. We have, it has fluctuated right through time. We started 5 years ago and got told no quite a bit. Now that it's actually built, they have picked up some steam on in-kind and some financial donations. Off the top of my head, we have a couple of grant opportunities with Caterpillar coming up that we knew going into this that we would get that would equate to, I believe, $50,000. annually, so that we're going to start with that on some, which those things have to be used for tools and equipment in that program. There have been some offsets on some of our staff, like TCAT is providing an instructor, so that's gotten our staff number reduced for savings as well. And we still have plenty of businesses circling. We haven't inked any deals yet on significant numbers, but we've had plenty of opportunities, and I do feel very confident that more financial things will come our way.
So when we're out in the community, we should still beat the bushes, and I'm thinking In-N-Out Burger.
Always.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned In-N-Out. James Remedy, our food service director, has already made contact with them. So we're already having a dialogue. That's about all I can say. He actually showed up as a customer to start that conversation.
What's our enrollment numbers for that? I mean, we have the kids expressing interest in it. Are they signing up?
It's been unbelievably great. I know Chris Schneider probably has those numbers, and Dr. Qualls, you may have those numbers off the top of your head.
You know me, I'm going to round up and embellish for good sake, but I'm going to ask Chris to come up and get an official count.
Jeremy does preacher count.
Yes, I do. We are at, our max capacity is 525 at the IC. The EC is 280. Our wait list at the EC is lengthy. We will stay at capacity for the foreseeable future. I don't ever see that going down. But would you like to give a count for program by program?
Sure. Our total applications, like you said, we have an enrollment cap at 525. We had 505 apply. In each of our programs, we had 205 out of 200 for our aviation program. We had 77 out of 100 for our cybersecurity and artificial intelligence program. We had 120 out of 40 for our advanced power and machinery. Wow. We had 29 for our fire management, 12 positions. We had 12 positions for fire management. We had 29 apply. And then for our hospitality, tourism, and culinary, we had 71 apply for 75 spots.
That also doesn't include, we have some late applications that have come in that they're coming through. We were hoping for 50%. It looks like we'll be starting at 100% with 800 kids daily going in and out of that campus between the two facilities.
It's scary and exciting at the same time.
We haven't even opened the doors for that, have we? And so we haven't even opened the doors yet, and they're still, wow.
That's right.
And one last thing, we've already won some awards for the building from an architecture standpoint.
I don't want architectural awards
Okay.
for buildings. We need to keep it cheap.
Okay. We didn't pay for that, by the way.
That was a grant.
So that was my question. Remind me how much money was secured in grant funding for like the building and the startup?
15.5 million.
And hypothetically speaking, if that were to have come in under budget, would we get to keep the extra dollars, or do those go back to the state?
We have 4 years. Basically, they rolled it out an additional year for an extension. We have 5 years to spend every penny, or it's gone. Don't worry, Mr. Brown. It's gone. The pennies are gone.
I have no doubt. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Does that answer your questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I know Rachel was in the process of talking about expenses. I wanted to give a couple of examples of things we've done. You see food served at meetings. We will sometimes, some of our professionals will gather and have a working lunch. Basically, that's an example, a relatively small example of us saying, no, we're going to do lunch on our own. We can get by without that. So that's on the small side. On a more significant side, based on the conversation we had last month, we looked very closely at the textbooks, and I know, Dr. Johnson, you had asked questions about that. This particular budget includes deferring the elementary social studies textbooks to the next budget year, based on our professionals' discussion, so we reflects that. We had questions about computers. That includes us not purchasing new devices for K2. So that's the other end of the spectrum, from the small things, just a meal here and there, to those large ticket items that are in the millions.
So Jason, I mean, I really do appreciate y'all. I mean, it's playing games with the
Yes.
with 3-card money, right? So I mean, eventually you gotta pay up, but we'll just kick it down next year, and we'll have this fight next year. I'm still waiting for that year that's not tight for you to do a couple of things that we've been putting off. But when you think about pushing off the elementary, what's the next? What are we purchasing in next year's budget?
Our proposal in next year's budget is to purchase the secondary schools, middle school and high school, and that's the $5 million plus that Rachel mentioned. The total cost for the social studies textbooks is can't remember where we are, but the idea would be we would flatten out that budget expense among 2 years.
But what cycle is the year after?
Oh, the year after. The year after, Dave, I can't remember 2 years.
Yes, sir. It's CTE and world language,
So
small
we'll-
adoption. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that'll be smaller. So
That's right.
it'll be kind of normalized. It should be kind of flat, as opposed to having relatively small this year and a big spike. It'll level it out.
That's right.
not-
And
not
that's
terrible.
part of our thinking. It's been close to every other year we have the large adoption. The state has traditionally, TDOE has traditionally done a 7-year adoption cycle, but they've actually expanded that the last few years and pushed ELA an extra year, they pushed science an extra year, social studies. So we anticipate if they continue to do that, this will give us an opportunity to flatten out the budget a little bit annually rather than have those large spikes and drops. Now, to your point, some of this is kicking the can. Some of it is actual cuts, some of it's deferral. And so we really tried to use every tool available to us.
What's the likelihood that we're able or not able to have those books available for the fall for the elementary students?
Dr. Allen, can you speak to that?
Unlikely, if not impossible. So we'll have to have plans for the elementary. Now, the reason we made that conscientious decision to go ahead and push that back is there's much fewer standards related to social studies with those age groups. So we'll have to be strategic about how we make sure that teachers have the appropriate materials, but there will be a delay. We won't be able to get them for the first day of school.
So are you going to have to, in the interim, are you going to end up using our current OE, what do we call it, OER?
Short answer is yes. Dr. Allen, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Jen is over here whispering things. Jen, do you want to just speak to that? Because actually you're probably a more appropriate person to talk about it.
Yeah, actually, thank you very much for the question. And really the answer is we don't know yet. We know that it is possible that if we're able to say to a publisher, this is what we've selected for elementary, we're going to purchase once July 1st rolls around. We know we will not have physical materials, very likely won't have physical materials. Is it possible that we'll at least have access to teachers' digital resources? Maybe, and so the teachers can begin using that on a limited basis with classrooms. We really just don't know until we reach that point.
I guess I'm going to call this one I really don't want to do it. We're kind of our hand is being forced, and I appreciate you trying to find $3 or $4 million where you can, but it makes me mad that we have to. I mean, I think the county commission needs to know that in doing this, they're causing our teachers extra work, and our students are not getting the education that they deserve because we're trying to be cheap. So that's the bottom line.
It's well stated.
All things being equal, I mean, we're going to go into the 27-28 budget planning process in the red again.
That's correct.
There's no way around that. So it's really just a question of how much, and there's no way to really sit here and project what that number would be, right? I mean,
So not necessarily. We know that A lot of our contracts that we do have may have built-in 3% or 5% increases when we negotiated the contracts. We know that with any raise, that's going to be, obviously a percentage increase. So could we project out? We could, just a guesstimate, but that would be a guesstimate only. Again, the raise, I will say this too, we have never done a raise that the commission hasn't said, go forth with a 5% request, go forth with a 2% request. We have followed. So depending on what they would say, that's looking into a crystal ball of what could happen in the future.
The only reason I bring it up is because the board's going to be sitting here, and some of us in the room won't be on it and some will, but the board's going to be sitting here a year from now having the same conversation. And the number is going to be determined by what we do or don't do here. And so whatever we cut, we're pushing off something we know that the district's going to have to spend money on. We're pushing it off to that next discussion a year from now. So it's not like we're getting rid of the discussion. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen 12 months from now, and somebody else is going to be having it.
That's right. Now, the only maybe not that is actually my biggest worry is we're presenting the commission a budget this year, to your point, that's still in the red. If we don't receive additional revenue from the county or the state, we won't get our budget passed, and we're going to have to come back and discuss it again. You all remember we had to do that last year. And that's the time when the county commission found a way to close the gap by changing the projections on property tax revenue. The best case scenario is what you just articulated.
To that point, that raises another question. Is this based on 92% or is it based on a higher number?
It is based on 94, which is what the county said to go ahead and do again.
Okay.
It was a one-time
It was a one-time
fix
thing.
last year. It just did it one time last year, but now that one-time fix is gone. So we would have been even further behind if we had gone back to 92.
Right.
And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I know some of you were looking at this and going, some of these things was overdone to start with. And again, what that looks like, anything from mileage, you go, well, they don't need to get paid for mileage. We send people out. I'm going to talk about my department because that's what I know best. I have someone who works with the 52 bookkeepers. So when they have issues, she'll go visit, and she gets mileage when she travels from school to school. We're already having these conversations of instead of you going, it may have to be online, which you can do some of those things, but sometimes the in-person, because you can actually physically see what they're looking at and that kind of thing. We're making concessions. It's putting more things on our people. So even though you go, it's mileage, that has an effect. And again, I'm speaking, but every department had the same conversations. All of it, contracted services. We elected to cut something that we've had for years that is a resource to us, just because is it mission critical? Does it directly affect students? It affects us. We can get information, but we're going to have to go dig for it. It's not going to be provided to us. Okay, but that's just responsibilities on people. So I will beat this one to death in that these cuts hurt, and they hurt every department. There wasn't one department that came in and said, hey, we're going to save you. We've got it. That didn't happen. And this whole room of people, there were a lot of heated discussions, and I don't mean heated in a bad way. We're all very passionate about what we do and how we do it, and so it took a lot.
So a lot of what was cut are some of those things that make the work easier.
Correct. Resource materials where we subscribe to things and say, okay, it comes to us. Okay, next year I've got somebody I'm going to have to assign that your job is now to go to the Department of Education website, and you're going to have to look for these things. Again, can we do it? We can, but that's just a different responsibilities added to people. Some of this, and I said, maybe it's a good exercise that we really reevaluate what we have and what we're doing and how can we do it differently. And so, sometimes there's growing pains, and is this painful? It's painful. But we've made the decisions that we felt like, again, we want to make sure that the money is left for our people and the direct services to our students.
And to Rachel's point there, it also did lead us to some discussions about some potential longer term analyses is there some work we need to do to look at how we provide services and look at other models that might be less expensive, things that might have an impact on us 2-3 years down the road. But these are cuts. The reality is, and Rachel may close with this, so I'm going to go ahead and toss this out now. The reality is our expenses are keeping up with inflation by and large, but our revenues are not. Is that a fair statement?
It is. Yep.
I know you obviously have planned on in these projections not spending the money on elementary textbooks for social studies. So that's the understanding. But if you were to decide along the way that you wanted to actually do that, and hypothetically the money were there to do it, when is the no-go decision on whether to do that or not?
Y'all would have to tell us the dates. I mean, we would come back to you all from fund balance and say if we had it available in fund balance, which would then take 2 months if we did it, because you would have to approve it and then the commission would have to approve it. You all would have to say what date do you feel comfortable with?
I mean, just operationally, how far into the school year can you go where you would say we need to make that decision for planning purposes?
Well, I'm going to speak just generally and then ask Jen, Jenny, and Dave for an answer. You get in a queue, you get in a line based on who chooses particular textbooks. And so the earlier you get in the line, the quicker you get the materials. So that's the general answer. I don't know if you have any specifics on, is there a particular date that you project as to when we could actually make the order and be confident we have it in time for teachers to prepare? That's the question.
I guess the only way that I can answer, and I'll let Jen jump in if she feels differently to this, but really it's that same process that we go through every year. As soon as we make the board approves the textbooks, we begin that process immediately, because there's a lot of back and forth conversations with the publishers about what exactly is coming, the professional development that needs to take place. So I guess to answer your question directly, we would take them at any time, but to ensure that they're in teachers' hands and they have the appropriate professional development before school starts, we need that information now.
Well,
yeah, to put it directly in.
We're talking about social studies adoption, so you're talking about really about March of 27. So
this time next year.
Yeah, this time next year.
Correct.
So could we at that point make a request to take it out of fund balance and reimburse fund balance? That may be a possibility.
Yeah, I just, for what it's worth, I agree with Jay. I just think that I know why you're doing it, and I appreciate that you're doing it, but I don't like it. I think it just creates more problems than it does.
I guess that would be my preference, that we say that we're not gonna push off to the next year. We're gonna take it out of fund balance.
Yes.
So it's still coming out of they're still gonna have to plan to pay for it in the next fiscal year, because it's not gonna be there, and because we're gonna reduce our fund balance.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to plan on this being the way to go.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for that, Rachel. There may be an accounting issue related to that, because that's a decision that's going to have to be made middle of next year rather than announcing right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Sorry,
Well, I know you
correct,
can't-
because it's not, so, yeah, again, we would bring it back as a vote.
Right. I mean, it's gonna have to be approved by the county commission one way or the
Right.
other. But I think we've done it before where we paid where we had to commit to zero raises, and we paid for the raise out of fund balance. So
That's right.
we kicked the can down the road. They got to avoid, raising taxes, but we go and push it down to next year.
Yeah.
So you can't do that 2 years in a row.
That's
Because
right.
And that's
you're
why I'm saying it. It's just it's creating one more
Well,
problem.
we did
for
it, we already
somebody
did it
else.
last year, and we got the minimum tax increase that they could, because they don't plan more than 12 months, more than a month in advance. We get to next year and we live to fight another day.
And just to be clear, I think I ask this every year, but we have to start with 3%, but we don't have to end with 3%.
You have to end with 3%.
So you don't have to start with 3%.
Oh, when you end, that is your start, but then July 1, could you go ahead? Yes.
Okay, but you do have to end with 3%.
So I have some questions about textbooks. First off, for elementary classrooms, do we purchase a textbook per student, or do we do classroom sets? And then my second big question is, I mean, most elementary classrooms I've been in, they embed a lot of the social studies into the ELA. So I'm wondering how much of that has happened. And, you know, are our elementary teachers using social studies textbooks much? And then my third question, because I brought this up last month, you know, when are we going to start teaching the new standards? Are we going to wait until we do the textbook adoption, even though they've been out for a year and we haven't started them yet? Are we going to start them next school year? Like, when are we going to start the new standards so our teachers are prepared for that? Because bottom line, the standards is what teachers need to know. Textbook is a resource to help with instruction.
We had that last comment you made, we had that very discussion in the context of this, the focus on the standards. And actually, we had the same discussion in the context of one of the later agenda items related to health, that the standards are the key. Dr. Oyer, can you answer those questions?
I would defer to the first questions to
the
Jen.
classroom
I knew it go this way. In terms of the resources and when we're going to begin teaching, we're going to begin teaching those standards as soon as we can, as the school year begins and as we get going. In terms of the resources and what's being embedded in ELA, certainly with Wit and Wisdom, there are some cross-curricular components, but that they're not being embedded. Those standards aren't being embedded directly in our ELA classes, because of the depth of the ELA work that's happening in those classes. So we couldn't replace, from my perspective, we couldn't assume that all of our social studies standards would be covered in the ELA class. In terms of the individual books, I'll let Jen speak to that, because you were.
And let me give a nutshell to your question too about this teaching social studies embedded in ELA. The ELA content has some social studies facts, but it's not driven by Tennessee standards. So the elementary school schedule includes dedicated social studies time to teach the standards. Dr. Allen?
So I want to clarify one thing that Dr. Oyer said, because I know what she meant, but it may have been heard differently. The new standards are not applied until the 27-28 school year. So when Dr. Oyer said we're going to start teaching those standards as soon as we can, we're going to start teaching those standards in the 27-28 year. And I know we've had this conversation at a previous board meeting, but the standards that are in play right now and the standards that our students will be assessed on this year and next year are the old standards. So the standards guide our work. We start with that before we even begin planning and for instructional purposes. So the year that the new standards that have been approved are in play for our students, and our students will be assessed on those standards, is the 27-28 year. That's when we will begin teaching and utilizing those particular standards. The question about are we doing a classroom set or are we purchasing a book for each individual student is a little more complex, and Jen has already had many conversations with publishers about that. So she's going to add depth to this. I'll talk from a 30,000-foot view. We do it the least expensive way that we can to provide the materials that are needed for our students to learn the material. So in some of those cases, the way the publishers have packaged the materials, for us to get a physical copy, they may tie it to a digital purchase so that we have to buy both. So we could buy a digital license without a hard copy. We don't do that. We make sure that there's always print material. Now, I think the question is a great question, because anytime there's an opportunity for us to purchase a class set instead of a text for every single student, we do that, because that is a much less expensive way for us to do it. So if the publisher packages it in such a way that we can do that, and the students do not need to take those materials home to be successful on the standards, then that's absolutely what we'll do. Jen, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I think that's really good. And actually, that very question about to what extent are our social studies standards addressed or covered in some of our ELA, I actually had that conversation with our elementary social studies specialist just a week maybe ago, and he and I were kind of like just sort of playing through what is the possibility to be able to address some of those social studies standards through ELA and the readings the student are already doing. What we found is that there are some places where there is some overlap, but there's definitely a lot of gaps, and in many places it's off by years. So like the content might be covered in social studies, and this is just an example, in grade 2, whereas the ELA reading that covers the same kind of content is in a different grade. So the students may see some of it, but it's not all of the standards that are going to be covered, and it doesn't always align with the grade level. It's also to some extent dependent on what our ELA curriculum is. So you know, our ELA curriculum is up for adoption in 3 years. So we might potentially be returning to the same conversation when we go to ELA, because while a curriculum that we have right now might cover some of the standards, when we get a new ELA curriculum, it could be the same, it could be different. It's just hard to say.
So our older elementary grade levels are departmentalized. You have a 4th, 5th grade teacher who's teaching social studies and ELA. So that's just so everybody can get a visual. That's a potential opportunity for classroom sets where you have students coming into a classroom. I wanted to make sure you all had a way to visualize that.
Yeah, and Mr. Golden, if I may, just as the students get older, it's more unlikely that we would be able to do a classroom set because they need the materials. But a good example would be like CTE, for example. Oftentimes in CTE, we'll buy just a classroom set. So I just want to ensure you as a board, we do have those in-depth conversations. We try to do it the least expensive way that we possibly can for every single content area and every course that we teach.
So I'd just like to clarify. So our teachers are not getting training on the new social studies standards until the summer of 2027. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. Now, what I will say is that we've already begun meetings and we've already begun discussions with our teachers, but the actual training that they will receive on the standards, because we're limited in the number of training days that we have with our teachers, will not formally begin until that year that you just described.
So we're asking them to adopt a textbook for standards that they're not trained on until after they adopt the textbook.
So actually that piece of it comes into the leading up to the textbook adoption. So next school year, which is 26-27, part of the teacher professional development around selecting a textbook is looking at those new standards. It does also vary a little bit from content to content depending on how the standards change. So we found that in science, elementary, the standards stayed very similar. So it was not a deep understanding that teachers needed to have, because they really stayed very consistent. In upper grades, this last cycle in science, we had some pretty significant standards changing, and so that was a significant piece of the professional development. We've seen a little bit of the opposite. We're previewing for social studies. It feels like upper grades, the standards changes are pretty minimal. In elementary, they're more significant, but not so much in content, but in grade level. So sections of standards are shifting grade levels. Imagine like a slide puzzle, but the actual substance of them isn't changing too much. And so to that question, that will be part of the textbook adoption process, but not necessarily that deep, now I'm actually going to be teaching the standards until we move into that next year when we're teaching them.
Like I said, we just have to have a philosophical disagreement. I wouldn't do it that way.
We think it's important for the students who are learning the standards this last year to have that same focus that their predecessors have had. And then when the standards change, we shift the focus with those new teachers. And I recognize there's a philosophical difference, but we wanted to make sure that those students getting that last year didn't get shortchanged.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Allen, for saying about and continuing to purchase printed sets and everything. I think several of us in the room were on the Screen Time Committee, and we were just hearing, and I know you're part of those discussions too, time and time again, about the importance of off-screen learning, so that continues to be a priority for our students. Thank you for saying that.
And I have a question for Jen Sauer. If I understand correctly, is the elementary curriculum for social studies, like the 4th grade and the 5th grade, is moving from like American history and Tennessee state history? Is that flip-flopping?
Yes, I'm hesitating because I actually, if you don't mind, give me 1 second. I asked our social studies curriculum specialist this question: can you give me a little tiny cheat sheet of what exactly are those standards switching? Because I always forget which ones are switching where. So let me see if I can get to that quickly. Here it is. Okay, so here are the big changes that are coming in elementary school. So in 3rd grade, we currently teach geography. That's moving to 5th grade. In its place, grade 3 is receiving several U.S. history standards from 4th grade up to the 1850s. I'll send you this in writing if you'd prefer. 4th grade, the semester of U.S. history is moving to 3rd grade. In its place, grade 4 will receive several 20th century U.S. history standards from 5th grade. And in grade 5, the 20th century U.S. history is moving to 4th grade, and in its place, grade 5 is receiving geography standards from 3rd. So, like I said, big slide puzzle that's happening. It's not a lot of content difference. It's more in what grade level will the students see it.
So that brings me to my second question: is how are we going to transition so that the kids aren't getting something like twice, like it's in 3rd grade and now it goes 5th grade?
That is a great question. We are already puzzling through that, and the good news is that we've gotten word from the state that they are working through that as well. So what we've heard from the state is going to start providing guidance to schools to be able to backfill in areas where maybe a student group hopscotched over some standards and maybe showed up in an upper grade missing something, so that we can make sure that we're not totally skipping over content. So we know that guidance from the state is coming. We're hoping some support resources are coming from them as well, but we're already looking ahead to that. And then as far as the repeat of standards is concerned, some of that is going to be our conversation once we have a new adopted curriculum. The good news is it is going to be different material. So while it may be the same standards or similar standards, if it's in an upper grade level, it'll be covered to a different amount of depth, and it will definitely be with a different resource. So our hope is once we actually have that concretely, we'll be able to say, hey, this is different enough for students that we feel good about it, but it is something we're really cognizant of. I am going to leave this slide. We're moving on, but I just need y'all to keep that in your mind. So we're moving on to how did we get from 25-26 to what we're asking for 26-27, from the 562 to 569. Again, we decreased our operational requests. We have included that experience role. A 4% cost of living raise that the county told us to put in is 12.6, and then we reduced payroll lines by 5.6. And when I say payroll lines, that's including pensions and insurance, Social Security, Medicare, all the things. And again, went back and looked, what are our actuals? Who have we hired? We've hired younger people and we've had older people retire, then that average salary kind of goes down. So that's just the reconciliation of how we got from last year to this year. I do want you to go ahead and Mr. Golden.
Rachel, if you don't mind, jump back to that slide. Okay. I want to point this out. You see that 12.6 county government proposal for the 4% raise. We are netting an increase in our budget of $7 million, including that. That means we have dropped our budget net by $5 million or so, even including the new CTE program. I just wanted you all to get your arms around that, the significant drop that we've done, largely because we're having to deal with the revenue side. Go ahead, Rachel.
So Mr. Golden told you, this is that summary page that I think, yeah, it's on page 34. Over on the left side, lets you know what our gap is. And so again, in February, we were at 39 million. We're currently sitting with a gap of 20 million. And most of the time I'll get the question, you know, or can we close that gap? We will close in that. Will we have additional fund balance? Potentially. Could there be things that come in from the state? Potentially. Those are the unknowns. Am I going to be able to close $20 million? No way. Last year when we brought the budget to you, I believe our gap at this point was about 15 million. And we went back and forth with the county commission on what that looked like and made some further cuts and then did some things. And so again, 20 million it's a large gap, but I can justify how we got here. And it is the game of kick the can. When you go through the actual document yourself, the detail behind that summary page, and you're looking at expenses, you're going to see a lot of lines going down. Those are those cuts. I want to remind you too, you'll see it in this one, and it was in last year's. Under the section related to the Board of Education, it's on page 41, there's that 12.6 million is listed in one line where we put in the raise. And then we come back after the year starts and we push it back out to all the correct accounts. That's showing up in that revised budget. So when you see some additions and it looks like, well, a lot of these payroll lines look like they're going up, they went up from last year's budget. So it's not additional money in this budget, it's just that it was transferred from that one line to these other lines. And so page 36, you see the textbooks. 38, we always have that question about 71,400, which is where we put our money related for the school site-based, where principals then can budget out, so it looks funny in the budget. That's what that is. And again, the board underneath y'all aren't getting a $12.6 million raise. We're putting it in there for everybody, and then we'll push it back out if that gets approved. So again, we're sitting with a $20 million gap. How did we get from 39 to 20? Again, here's your summary of that. Operational cuts, payroll and benefit cuts. We did have additions to revenue, additions to fund balance. And I want to go back and talk about fund balance a little bit. We didn't really do that. Another thing that Mr. Golden asked us to do was going forward for this year is if there's an expense that's not mission critical, it's not going to directly affect. Same thing. So will fund balance, we're still making tweaks to it, and that's what I'm saying. This number may change a little bit before we're finally done that gap. But that's how we got from 39 to 20. And not easy. Not easy at all.
Rachel, would you go back one slide?
Sure.
Estimated fund balance 39 million, and you've got 3.6 out beside that. That's what it is as of that date.
As of March 6th.
And it needs to be roughly 17 million to start the budget year.
So that 39, when you're looking at this calculation, this gap has a $17 million 3% fund balance in it.
Right.
And so, yeah, we would need to have 17 at the end of next year. This year, it's about 16 million.
17 on top of the 20.
No, that 17 includes that 20.
Includes the 20.
So, Mr. Brown, for practical purposes, that fund balance from this year becomes the revenue source for next year's
year.
budget. And I know Rachel says that's not the appropriate term, but, yeah.
In theory, I mean, maybe you could get there. This kind of explains, so we're going to talk about fund balance since y'all already.
I want to do one more thing,
Okay.
actually. You did a good job of giving some examples within the body of this budget. When she talks about all those cuts we had in every department going through, that far right column in that content shows the percentage change in every single line item.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked at every single line item. So I encourage you, as you prepare for Monday, if there's any particular line item question you have that you identify based on those percentage changes, feel free to ask. But because we went through so many line items, we felt like it wasn't appropriate to give you a presentation on every one.
And it was a great question of, hey, what were the cuts? We had that today. Can you kind of go over what the cuts were? It is literally almost every line in this whole document, there was some cut, anywhere from $200 to $10,000. I mean, it was all across the board. And so, dig into there and look and see. It's by major category, and it's pretty self-explanatory what's in each one. But if you don't, I say it's self-explanatory, it is for me, but if it's not for you, all you got to do is ask, and we will certainly give you as much detail as you want.
Sorry, thank you.
So fund balance, so let's talk about it. It's not a revenue source. What fund balance is that cumulative net effect of revenues versus expenses. So any given year, if I have more revenue than I have expense, that extra goes into my quote-unquote savings account / fund balance. If expenses are more than revenues, then I have to pull money out of my savings account in order to cover that. So that's what fund balance is. And you have different kinds of fund balance. What we really look at is unassigned. Assigned and unassigned are probably the two big pockets. And when you're thinking about that, let's talk about assigned fund balance means we have committed that we're spending these funds. And so our unassigned fund balance is truly that cush. That is if something goes wrong, this is money we have available to us to spend. And so from 2021 until 2025, because that's the last audited financial statements I have, that unassigned fund balance has gone down $17 million. So that just means we have less flexibility in if we have a need that we can come back for. So we are cutting it, we have cut the budget to the point, different things affect fund balance. We've cut the budget to the point in the last 2 years that we don't really have a ton of residual money now going into fund balance that doesn't get spent. We're spending what we've budgeted. What does that mean? In the past, we had unfilled positions. Our hiring rate right now, retention rate right now is higher than it's been in a while. So if you had unfilled positions, then that money didn't get spent, went into fund balance. We're spending it. There's less of that going into fund balance. And we make those statements of, hey, don't spend, to try. That's why Mr. Golden was saying, if you don't have to spend it this year, because then that means the expenses would be less than revenue maybe, and we'd have some going back into fund balance. But fund balance is never intended to be an operating bucket to pull from. It is your cush. It is your safety net. Some people will say you should have 3% of your operating expenses in fund balance. We don't even have a half a month of operating expenses in fund balance. And so that's something to think about. Once you spend your fund balance, unless there's money going back in, it doesn't just replenish itself. So when we start chipping into it, it goes down. We don't have that money going back in. That's one reason why we're at a $20 million gap. The other reason, one other factor is changing the 94%. We've talked about that with revenue and what we budgeted related to property taxes. Used to, we budgeted 92%. What that means is this county in general is going to collect anywhere from 98 to 99% of property taxes. But they would tell us, only budget 92% of what you expect, because then that gives you a cush, and that would flow into fund balance. Last year, in order to not raise property taxes or not give another penny, they said, hey, instead of doing 92, do 94. So it was a one-time fix where we could budget more revenue, but then that's gone. That reduced our fund balance for this year by about $5 million.
And some of the commissioners at the time spoke to their colleagues and emphasized that this is a one-time fix.
It's a kick. We've talked about kick the can. This was the game of kick the can. We kicked that can, and that can's not there to kick anymore. I mean, I say that. They could come back and say, okay, this year we're going to do 96%. But we are just killing that fund balance where we don't then have anything to fall back on. And so assigned fund balance means this is how much of what we have in fund balance, our total fund balance, that we're using to balance the budget. And that has increased for us from 21 to 25 by $43 million, what we're requiring of our fund balance. That's huge. And so the one point that Mr. Golden already made is our revenues have increased by 22.66%, but our expenses have increased by 25.26%. You all know that doesn't work in your home. If your revenue is less than your expenses, eventually you hit that wall. And so that's not sustainable to keep operating like that if you don't have something replenishing that fund balance. The consumer price index, the average for the last 5 years has been 25%. So I don't think we're totally, you can't say, oh, they've blown it, they've just overspent. We're right in line with what nationally is happening. We just don't have the revenue to keep up with those expenditures.
And we've cut.
decrease it. And correct, and we've cut. We've made those cuts on that.
And I want to make this point of emphasis, and certainly welcome any team members to speak to this as well. Based on the process we went through, hitting every line item, having our team look at every position, have our team look at every operational expense, we've reached the conclusion that if we do any more cuts, it will affect services. So we've set out to make sure that we could comfortably and confidently say that based on the work that we've done. So that's where we are with that. One other thing I wanted to mention, that county proposed pay raise is, if I'm not mistaken, 12.6 million for us. Without that, our gap is about 7.5 million.
So again, I'm just going to go back. We've got this $20 million gap, and somebody asked me, are you comfortable with that? Am I comfortable with a $20 million gap? No. Am I comfortable asking the county commission to help us? Absolutely. We didn't just make loosey-goosey decisions to get here. We followed their directives for years on what to ask for related to raises. We're not spending exorbitant amounts of money. Again, we came to the decision that we wanted to do within this budget, follow what their guidelines were, which was that reduction of 5% in operations, and then requesting that 4% raise. And that's where we are. So am I comfortable saying, are we balanced? No. I mean, nobody can look at that and say we have a balanced budget. But do I feel like we've put in the work and we're presenting what is appropriate? Absolutely, without a doubt.
And Mr. Chair, you had the wisdom to thank Rachel on the front end for this. When we finished that exercise, we applauded her in our leadership team meeting. She's shaking her head.
We don't
no,
do that, no.
But because we were walking through it in every one of our departments, but Rachel was having to compile, give totals, give projections. So I want to thank her for that, just as you did when we started this discussion.
Questions? Any further questions for Ms. Farmer?
First off, I mean, yes, thanks for all of you for giving us a budget that you look to cut some things, and I love the question that drove it, does it directly impact students? With that being said, you know, last year I brought up instructional coaches, and I want to bring that up again. One question I have is, I can't remember, I think you told us last year, but what year did the instructional coaches start? I can't remember. Was it 2009?
The grade bands have started at different times. So elementary has been in place since 2009. We had a healthy debate about when the middle school started. Middle school principals were making conscientious decisions with their staff to utilize some of their staff for coaching positions. They were officially brought into the budget, Ms. Hall, in 2023, I believe. And that was the same time that the high school coaches were brought on board.
And so last year when I asked for, you know, data for the impact they were having in classrooms, I didn't get any. And this year I was pleasantly surprised to see some data. I do have some questions about it. My first question is, it says that one of the primary things that coaches spend their time on is unpacking standards and making, like, pacing for content. And we've also heard that curriculum specialists do that, and we have 16.5, well, we have a little more than that at central office, but there were 16.5 at central office. So help me understand, like, what's the difference? Because I thought the curriculum specialists were doing most of that work, not the instructional coaches.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr. Allen.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Golden. I'll again share, and then I'll ask Jen to add any detail that she would want to add. So those 16 or so curriculum specialists are spread out among our 3,000 teachers and our teaching staff. So they do really district-wide professional development. They work with teachers to create the scope and sequence, to make modifications to the scope and sequence. The teachers in the building, in their professional learning teams, with the assistance of the instructional coaches, take those pacing guides and those curriculum standards, and then that's where they as teams really break down and get to the meat and potatoes of the academic standards. Some of y'all have been in my office and we've walked through some of the unpacking of those standards that's required, and we've looked specifically at, I'll bring up a 5th grade math standard for you or a 6th grade math standard for you. And so in the depth and complexity of those standards are pretty mind-boggling for the age of the student. And so the coaches work with those teachers. Some of those teachers, they'll have a PLT where they're working with other teachers that are teaching the same content and the same subject. The coaches support that work as well, but some of our teachers are forced to work in isolation because they don't have a teaming partner, so the coaches will work with them to help unpack those standards. So it's a more localized effort when we talk specifically about the unpacking of standards. It's a more localized effort where the coaches can work more directly with the classroom teachers. The curriculum specialists are more broad and are working with all of the teachers at one time for their content professional development. Jen, is there anything you'd add to that? Okay.
And then on this one graph, you sent us meeting distribution. Do you all have that data by school? Or is this just a
I think we do have that data
district?
by school. I think that's an aggregation. We do have it school by school. I'm getting some nods.
We do. We provided a snapshot in print for you. The program that we're using to pull all of that data together is rather robust, and any of you are welcome to come in and sit down with us. We have Angie Procise here tonight who works directly with our instructional coaches. We'd be happy to go into detail about any of those, to specifically talk about, you know, we like how it's pulled together exactly what the work is that our coaches are working on, but we can even add more detail with the system that we're using in collecting that data. So yeah, there's some greater detail behind what you have there, and we're happy to go into any of that detail needed.
That would include grade bands as well as
That's
particular,
correct.
obviously, if we can do it school by
okay.
school.
That's correct.
My other thing on the second page, you know, there's some data like effect size, like there were no sources cited. Like, where did that come from? And you can send that to me later.
We'll send that. Yeah, the Jim Knight's Instructional Coaching Group citation. We'll make sure we get you that.
Where's that effect size data come from? And then have we ever surveyed our classroom teachers about their satisfaction with the instructional coaches?
We know that some of our instructional coaches, that is part of their practice. They actually incorporate into the work they do with teachers, is that one of the questions that they do ask at the end is some questions about, hey, give me as a coach feedback on how useful was the work that we did to your instructional practice, and help me help you more. So it is something that some of our coaches do institute on the building level, but it's not something that we collect from teachers, and it's not something that we do at a district level.
Is that something we could possibly do before we vote on Monday? And the reason why I ask is, you know, we invest $11.3 million into this program, and I'm struggling to see how that directly impacts students with the data that I've been given. So I don't know if that's something you all could survey all of our teachers.
So I would say anecdotally, we've been doing that for years. Dr. Oyer and Dr. Webb are here. They would be able to speak directly to firsthand accounts of what the principals share with them and how they're utilizing their instructional coaches and the need. I shared earlier that prior to 2023, principals were making PCR decisions to have instructional coaches anyway. That speaks to the value that they believe that they're providing. And then our instructional, the Angie Prosice, who leads our instructional coaches, is in the classroom with those instructional coaches while they're working with teachers. We get firsthand account feedback from them. The feedback that we receive is overwhelmingly positive. And I will say, when we went through the budget reduction process, we had specific conversations about instructional coaches. And I think the general consensus among our leadership team was, we want to look for things that impact our core instruction the least. Where can we find opportunities to reduce where we do not take away from what is critically important to what our responsibility is as a public school system, which is to prepare our students for college and career. We identified the teachers being the primary point of protection for us. What can we do to protect the classrooms to make sure that our teachers have all the resources that they need to be successful? A 1A to that we identified as the coaches. And those instructional coaches, in the development that they are working with the teachers to improve not only our teachers who need support in their first couple of years, but even our most advanced teachers. Their goal is to work with all of our teachers to help them identify areas for improvement. So when you look at what is core and critical to what we do in a school system of a $580 million budget, we've identified growing our teachers and helping our teachers be the absolute best that they can be as one of those core principles. We consider those coaches to be a tool that we have to improve that instructional effectiveness in those classrooms. And so, so from a qualitative standpoint, we've not formally surveyed our teachers, but I think any of our personnel that's worked directly with either the teachers, the principals, Dr. Webb and Dr. Oyer, or the coaches, Angie Prosice, it's overwhelmingly positive, especially during a time when our teacher pool is a little more slim than it has been in the last decade, especially at a time when the teachers that we hire sometimes come into the classroom not having the full pedagogy of a 4-year teaching program. So they need growth, they seek growth, they reach out and ask for assistance from our coaches. Another piece that we found to be really, really important, we actually have one of our instructional coaches here tonight that was working on her dissertation to identify the impact of instructional coaches in school systems. And a lot of the research points to the retention of classroom teachers. And so instructional coaches being a key cog, a key piece that helps teachers when they enter into the profession in the first 3 to 5 years, especially when those teachers become overwhelmed, stressed. I know some of you board members have teachers that are in that spot right now. And the instructional coaches have, from a research perspective, from a literature-based perspective, are the key pieces that help support those teachers through those years and help keep teachers in the classroom. And so we've, from my standpoint, I just want to make sure that I'm really, really clear with the board that we took the question about what is the impact on instructional coaches in the classroom seriously. We debated that feverishly when we were going through every line in the budget, and I think we've universally identified them as a key tool that we use for the growth and development of all of our teachers, and we see it as a direct impact on some of the success that we've had over the course of the last decade, and some of the success that we're having right now.
So, Dr. Johnson, to answer your specific question, yeah, I don't know how realistic it is that we could create a survey and get good
Maybe
qualitative
if I'd
data
had the
in
answers to my
in 2
questions
spots.
earlier, I would have been able to ask that, but I didn't.
Yeah, we gave those answers, about, right at 2 weeks ago. I think 13 days
right
ago, we
before
gave you
spring
those
break,
answers,
yeah.
sure. But to follow up on Dr. Allen's detailed comments, I know Laura Hall, our Fairview Middle School principal, is here, and then you referred to Lindsay as well. I'd like to invite them to give any detail to put some body into what you were sharing, if they're available.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I'm actually going to turn this over because we spent a lot of time talking about teacher retention and just the makeup of what our teachers are in our building. And soon to be Dr. Nelson, who did extensive research and really powerful research with the makeup of our teachers. I'm going to turn it over to her because this is one of the biggest benefits for having our instructional coaches in our building. When I think about the words that we're using this evening, talking about what is mission critical, this is a position that is mission critical, and if we eliminated these roles or even talk about that, it's going to set us back leaps and bounds with the instruction and innovation we're seeing in the classroom. Our coaches provide safe opportunities for our teachers to experiment, try new things with support. I've seen more teachers ranging from job-embedded teachers to teachers who've been in the profession for 20 years trying new things in the classroom, but they're doing that alongside the coaches. They're trying small group instruction, they're doing rotations, we're seeing more student engagement, new remediation strategies. It would be a huge misstep if these positions were eliminated, on top of just the makeup of the teachers that are in our building. So I'm gonna turn it over to Lindsay so she can just do a little bit more in-depth detail that's tied to research, data, and evidence.
Thank you all. One of the most significant findings through reviewing the body of research about early career teachers, teacher retention, and how coaching impacts them is we have more than half, 57% from the last school year of our new teachers in Tennessee are entering through alternative pathways. So as you probably know, that means they are given a provisional license on day one. They usually have zero educator preparation walking into the door. And although we are very glad they are here and they have an extensive skill set, they need support. And it is proven the highest level of support is an instructional coach and a mentor stepping side by side with them. So when we are providing that individualized, job-embedded, content-specific support with an expert teacher, then our newest teachers are feeling supported, they're feeling successful, and they're more likely to stay. I want to share with you 3 quotes that came out of the research just recently done from teachers in Williamson County. This is a third-year job-embedded teacher, and he's speaking to instructional coaching, and he said, "My first year, my coach honestly helped me a lot. She taught me how to lead a horse, get on, turn left and right, but slowly she held the rope while I was on, and then she watched from the side because I finally took the reins." What a beautiful picture of what coaching is. And this is a teacher who had never been taught how to teach, minus the pedagogy, minus the foundations of ed, nothing walking in day one. And because of this coach, this teacher is still in the game, and he even said, "I'm here for 5 to 10 years." Let me share another one. "Collaborating with my coach and my partner teacher has made this year so straightforward, it's probably the reason I'm still a teacher." This is someone who's been in the classroom for 7 months, and thankfully he's still there. So I just want to point to the work that coaches do every day. I'm an instructional coach myself. I've been in this role for 7 years. I have 20 years in education, and it is the most rewarding work that we do. Our teachers that partner with me not only teach me, I learn and grow with them, but we learn about our students every day. And because of coaching partnerships, that our kids are benefiting and teaching and learning is growing in this district. Thank you.
I also want to go into the question at the very beginning, which was the unpacking of the standards, and just give you a little bit more insight. We can provide resources that we use at our school that will kind of outline that with how we unpack the standards, how we utilize the data to then formulate remediation groups. We're happy to share any of that information. But just to talk a little bit about that, we meet weekly with our teachers, with the instructional coaches, because teachers teach. They teach with all the best materials that they have, all the best practices, and sometimes we have some students that it just didn't hit with, and so we have instructional coaches, we have principals, assistant principals that bring just a wealth of knowledge and perspective to those conversations, so we can make sure that all students are learning and mastering the materials. So what we do in that work is we look at the standards that students haven't mastered yet or they have mastered, and we make sure that our assessment was fully aligned to that standard. Did it measure the full scope of the standard? And then we identify very intentional groups of students that we either need to remediate. Maybe it's a vocabulary strategy, maybe it's reading comprehension, or maybe it's extension, maybe it's test taking strategies to do the gap. Because repeating that process, the same questions over and over again, is not going to move the mark. Those are a lot of the detailed conversations that we're having weekly, multiple times a week, that our instructional coaches are helping facilitate and bring new perspectives to our teachers who have taught it. They've given an assessment, and now what do we do with the data when students are mastering standards or not mastering standards? I also would love, we're offering, if anyone would like to come sit and see the work that we're doing, to see the work of our instructional coaches, you are more than welcome to come out to our school anytime to see it, because we are meeting weekly. We're meeting multiple times. We meet with each grade band and content area. You can even shadow for the day. We are more than welcome for you to see, because I truly think that if you sat with us and you saw the work that the instructional coaches are doing day in, day out, it would definitely change your perspective on the importance of this mission critical role. And so I would really challenge you to take us up on that offer.
Can you give us a, just so you know, I for one don't share the same disdain for the coaching. I love it. I think it's great. My daughter is a teacher, and I asked her if she would rather have a 3% raise or retain her coach. She's like, give me the coach. So I mean, I would be. That's not exactly the way I would frame the survey, by the way, but that it just shows she's a second-year teacher. And can you kind of walk through a couple of examples about the difference between mentoring and coaching? Because hey, it's great. It's a great thought that we would just have our best teachers be our mentors, and we do that. But I guess explain some examples of how the coach is in the classroom, kind of modeling the teaching and reviewing and watching them and giving them feedback on not only on the new teaching, but just on just overall teaching in general. So as far as another set of eyes, in addition to this principal and assistant principal, but just talk about that, like actual classroom interaction, and just what percentage of their time is like technically in the classroom teaching or watching the teaching?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The research shows that coaches are most effective when they are hyper-focused on coaching versus mentoring. And so often those of us in those roles, we wear both hats, but we need to specify which is which. Mentoring is more of the cheerleader role. This is establishing that sense of belonging. This is the pat on the back. This is making sure our teachers can get into Skyward and have a computer that logs in for them on day one. So this is more of the logistical supports in the building. Coaching goes into building competencies in teachers. So we follow the gym night model, and we are using impact cycles. So what that looks like is meeting very intentionally one-on-one with teachers. We start with, as a teacher, where are you feeling successful? Where are areas that you need? We will go in and co-observe with that teacher. And then we're offering strategies in order to increase student engagement, usually is one of them, to decrease problematic behaviors and to increase learning outcomes. And so with the teacher, we're establishing what that looks like. And then there's modeling, there's co-teaching. Literally at 1 o'clock today, I co-taught with a first-year job-embedded teacher, and we took a group of 12 students. I had 6, he had 6, that were all data-driven for a reteach group. We set a timer for 20 minutes. We each did a mini lesson together, and then we flip-flopped. So that is deep coaching, because we decided the data together. He is seeing me model that specific strategy we talked about, and then the students benefit from both of us in a room. So when you are in actual coaching, you are multiplying the effect of a highly effective expert teacher. So you are taking that first-year teacher who is learning and growing, but he doesn't have the expertise that the coach also has in the room. So it's those instructional, it's those assessment decisions that are made together, but then also taught together.
So that makes a lot of sense to me, but tell me what that would look like if the coach isn't a part of the equation.
That's a great question. It makes me think about really decades ago when we're going to one teacher, one classroom, and teachers are working in silo. There's a lack of collaboration. There's a lack of partnership. And when me as a teacher, I feel stuck with a kid, I'm really having to wait till the end of the class time, walk out in the hallway and look for help, when instead the coach is coming into the classroom with that teacher, with the students. So the impact is directly with students in the here and now. And I want to say, the research is showing the highest level of supports are the closest to the people, or the closest to the students, or the closest to the teacher. So when we remove that level of support and we put us farther and farther away, we are getting away from the students. We are getting away from that one student, that one name, and we're losing that mission critical purpose.
So I guess, so if you're in your mind, if we didn't have the coaches, we would have to take, we couldn't completely get rid of that in-classroom help with classroom management and instructional strategies. So that means that a teacher is going to have to leave their classroom to somebody else and have to backfill, versus you guys being, you don't have your own classroom, so you get to be 100% available to the teachers when they need it.
Sure, or it's after the fact, right? It could be a day later, it could be a week later, when I'm actually collaborating about solving that problem, when there is a quicker response time and we can actually do something with the teacher in the classroom pretty rapidly.
And just one last question, but what, so you guys, I know you help on classroom management, behavior management, as well as instructional, I guess, and this might be more of a question for Julie and Lee, but how much of that is driven by, is the coaches focus more on instructional coaches and the AP and the principal, or more classroom management and behavior? Is that the thought?
I'll answer from here. You stay. It's a really good question, and I think it brings into play that there are other people that are available to deal with the things that she was just speaking about, even if it's instruction, right? An assistant principal or a principal can engage in those conversations and that coaching as well. The difference is, I'm going to answer your question, but I want to address this piece. The difference is that as the principal, I'm this teacher's evaluator. I'm coming in and I'm given that score that has a significant impact on that teacher's career, right? Let alone their motivation, their engagement in the position. So I don't think about the assistant principal or the principal necessarily coaching a teacher on behavior management or classroom management. She can still do that as a coach. What my experience is without the coach, all behavior gets kicked out of the class and gets sent to the principal and assistant principal rather than helping that teacher. And what we know is that teachers leave because they don't feel supported. They feel like the behavior's too much. I don't have the skill set to do it. And imagine trying to manage those 30 kids while I'm trying to figure out what I'm teaching. Because remember, I haven't had any instruction on how to be a teacher. And so we focus, there are certainly coaching cycles that are specific to classroom behavior, that she is working with me as the classroom teacher on classroom management. That doesn't mean that a kid doesn't get removed and come see the principal or the assistant principal, but the coaches are engaging in that as well. We all, as leaders in the building, are engaging in that coaching. The difference is the role that we play. So Dr. Hall is going to be an evaluator. She can do coaching cycles. We have principals who do coaching cycles, but she's still the evaluator, right? And that mentor coach piece completely shifts the relationship in a really wonderful way. Does that help answer, or does that
it's-
answer?
No, absolutely. And I said I didn't have any more questions for y'all, but Vicky, do we have any data on, I know we talked about our turnover. Do we have any data on like turnover for us compared to our peers around us, like Metro and other counties that we compete for?
I can get you some comparison data. The actually TDOE pulls that data from all the districts. It differs a little bit from like what we look at internally just because of the way they gather the data. But we do have that, and I can definitely speak to when we get our exit interview forms, our questionnaires, a lot of times there will be, things about the support. Support is one of the biggest issues for new teachers. It's just if they don't feel supported, they're much more likely to leave than if they feel supported. But yes, I can see if I can get some comparison data.
Mr. Galbraith, if I may, I wanted to answer your question in part as well. But first, I think I may have been remiss. I was probably moving so fast. Dr. Allen had been talking about referring to Laura and Lindsay, so I just want to make sure everybody knows this is Laura Hall, the principal at Fairview Middle, and Lindsay Nelson, who's the literacy coach at Fairview Middle. So sorry, just in case we moved too fast on that. Mr. Galbraith, we do expect our principals to be instructional leaders as well. That is a key part of who they are. Dr. Royer mentioned some of the dynamic differences. I want to also mention the volume differences, right? Because there's so many teachers in a building, the time demands. The administrative team and the coaches often work as teams, and it varies a little bit from building to building based on who's in a particular team meeting. But those deep cycle coaching times where teachers identify gaps, set goals related to it, and then implement it, and then make adjustments based on what they get from their coaches. Those are largely driven by the coaches themselves because they've got the time to do it. Did I describe that well, y'all?
If I may, Mr. Galbraith, can I go back to the question that you asked of what would happen if the coach wasn't there? That answer was beautifully articulate. The answer that came into my head was it wouldn't have happened. That piece of the groups were divided by data. I'm guessing, knowing the quality of the coaching program, they looked at the data of students. They looked at what was happening, what needed to happen for that student, for those 12 individual students. A first-year teacher is not diving into that data. They might know, like in their gut, something's wrong. Julie's struggling with this, Jay's struggling with this, but they're not able to dive into, because they don't have the skill set. They may have all the passion in the world, but they don't have the skill set to say these 12 have an issue, these 6 need this particular strategy, these 6 need this particular strategy. So I don't believe that it would have happened. It wouldn't have happened in my classroom as a first-year teacher, and I was trained to be a teacher. So thinking about our first year, second year, third year, fourth year teachers sometimes who are our job-embedded teachers, that work simply, it wouldn't occur.
I had a question. We brought up the alternative pathways for teachers that, I know the state put that into place. What year did we start doing that? And then what percentage of our teachers fall into that category?
I think that's a Vicky question. So to answer your first question about what year, the state has, I'm going to say over the past dozen years or so, introduced different methods to get teachers in. With job embedded, they've changed the terminology from year to year. Vicky, but so I'm thinking maybe it started 12 years ago or so, but
right,
I'll let
there
you
were
fill
different
in.
types of provisional licenses. What they're calling now the job embedded license is where someone with a college degree can enter into a program, but they can simultaneously start teaching. So they may start teaching before they've actually done any training and anything towards being a teacher, but they do receive a license. So that part I've really noticed a big increase about during the time of the pandemic. There was a definite shortage. We definitely saw that we were, looking to different sources to hire teachers, and I think across the state it really increased. I do see that we are retaining some of the teachers that came in on the non-traditional licenses, and that is really helping, at least from my vantage point. And I know there's places and buildings where it's still really hard, but because they're getting some experience under their belt, and partly because of that support, they are staying. A lot of them are, and they're getting good.
Do we have any ballpark percentages off the top of your head?
It's hard, so I'm sorry, I meant to ask that. We don't really have a good way to track that, of what type of license they were on. We would have to go through all 3,000 teachers to see like what exactly their license is on. We did track like the ones that we hired through programs that we did some programs with Lipscomb and some other universities. We did track that, but I don't have a number for you on exactly how many there are.
Okay, thank you. I had a good friend who's been asking about this, so that's helpful information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Honestly, to me, it doesn't really sound revolutionary. It just seems to make sense. And I noticed when Vicki mentioned, lack of support is one of the big reasons that we lose teachers. Out of the corner of my eye, saw our WCEA reps sort of emphatically nod along with that, not for to express anything. I think it was just subliminal that that is. So that's interesting to get that from the level. But I just sort of think, in the military, when we had young soldiers come in out of basic training, and they'd gone through the basics of coming in, you had mentors, and squad leaders and platoon sergeants that sort of acted as that middle, because you didn't want to go to the company commander all the time, just like you don't necessarily want to go to the principal all the time. And they instruct, yes, but you've got more of that peer-to-peer leadership to bring you up to speed. And then in the private sector, I've had coaches and mentors in my career. I've got young lady in my team right now who's very bright, recently promoted, but she's not as experienced, and so we meet weekly, an hour just to touch base, because it's a lot easier for her to come to me as a peer who's in that role, who's been in that role, and what are the things that you're working on and doing, and what are the challenges, and what are those experiences, or things like that. So this just makes sense to me. And I also think about it as, but as an actual teacher, yeah, you are isolated. You have 20, 30 young eyeballs looking up at you, and you've got to go with that to not have those resources and be someone, fresh out of college or coming from a different career or something like that, or even if you are experienced and just trying to do something new, I go, how else do you get that experience? So this makes a lot of sense, so I appreciate that.
Okay, anything else?
Mr. Brown, just as a double check, Rachel did have that in her line items. The total expenditure is around 8 million plus the benefits. Again, we've concluded that it's important. They're that tier who's directly teaching the teachers, so we do see that as direct in those deep cycle coaching processes. They're in the classroom. They're giving help on teaching techniques, and they're evaluating, and so it's more direct than it might seem without actually seeing it happen in the classroom.
All right, thank you.
I was just going to say, I go back to what you said, Mr. Golden, before we considered that position about that any more cuts will hurt services, and I think that means that y'all considered all of the positions, across the schools. And I feel strongly the time that I spend in the schools and talking with teachers and talking with administrators that this position is vital and that it supports our teachers, which means that it supports our students. So thank you.
This was the end, so to speak, of the general purpose school fund. So if there's any questions that you have about GP, this would be the time. Any thoughts you have you want to discuss, to bring that up. Anything else on that?
I did want to mention one other item that is related to some of the questions you all asked. The last question in that memo that we gave showed our fund balance compared to county government's fund balance. So I did want to reference that. Our fund balance has been shrinking a little bit, and county government's has been going up just a little bit. That is an ask I'm going to have of them, although if they decide to increase the funding, they decide how.
Can you be more specific on that? I know you know the numbers, so I might as well share them.
It's over $100 million.
And I mean, just to be clear, as a percentage of their so we have our own fund balance, which is on $586 million. And what's roughly their non-school budget?
Rachel, you might have that off the top of your head. I have ballpark percentages in my head. It's about a third, but I don't have.
It's
good
about
numbers.
a third. Their actual expenses were about 150 million.
But then they have capital too, right?
They
So
do.
debt service.
They do, but they account for that debt service. So unassigned, truly unassigned fund balance as of June 30th of 25, and this was just pulled from audited financial statements, was 104 million.
Okay. So 104 million when we're down to we budget down using everything but our absolute statutory minimum.
The 3%. That's
3%, and they're on $104 million. So.
And they do.
Which was it's probably made up of 20 years of trustees' fees, actually. So.
But they're covering numerous departments as well. I mean, they're in a situation of balancing it all out, and I don't take that lightly either. They do have, a ton of people, different departments that they're trying to cover, but comparatively to us, yes, they have been able to increase.
And they've been good to us, with capital especially over the years.
You said it, so I didn't have to.
So the other thing I want to bring up is the 4% raise across the board. Is that something we would have to talk about now, or can we say we want to try to get that money and then we can talk about reallocating that money? One of the things I asked is, I know we have like a 30% turnover with some part-time food service workers, special ed, parapro, general ed, and according to the TSBA salary database, I mean, our leadership is in the top 3. If the central office staff that make $100,000 or more, if they didn't receive the raise, that would free up about $500,000. Is that, could we potentially look at giving some of our higher turnover rate positions a little bit more of a 4% raise, since trying to keep some of them in the schools to help with, students. And I don't know, like I said, do we have to do that now, or do we have to, do we just let the budget pass? And then we would talk about that?
Well, and I can speak to that, and then Vicki and Rachel fill in for me. Right now, our intent and plan is, if the county funds it, to do that 4% across the board based on what we talked about in February. But you all do have that flexibility if we receive the funds to specify. We would need some time because we have an obligation to talk to the teachers, the association, the WCEA, through the PECA process, and have them give some input. We've had some meetings with them, so if there's a proposal by the school board to make any alterations on the teacher side, on the professional side, we'd have to have that discussion. Some of the central office folks are in that professional group, and so if I'm not mistaken, they are not supervisory, some of the curriculum specialists, et cetera. So we might have to have some discussion about some of those. I'm trying to check, is there any other detail that I should add to that?
So maybe a specific question would be, would something like that, like she's describing, have to be done as a motion attached to the budget approval, or would it be just us approving a total amount of money and then administratively, you all would do the allocation later at the board's direction if it were something other than an across-the-board 4% raise?
Well, I'm going to say it my way as the chief administrator, and you all fill in. We would need to have a decision before the end of the fiscal year. So in
Correct.
essence,
Our
June
12-month
is,
employees start July 1,
Yeah.
so the pay rate goes into effect as of July 1.
June would be the deadline, but we would need to back schedule that deadline a little bit to give us time to talk to the teachers.
So it could be made as a separate motion on a board agenda after Monday night,
I think it could be.
which would be April or May.
Vicky may have something to add.
And, well, I wanted to say too, that the food service that they're not in this GP budget, they're in their own fund, so just keep that in mind too.
But really, what we're really approving with the budget is a dollar amount.
That's correct. The
And then-
aggregate dollar
and
amount.
so you're just saying that before the end of the year, and I'm not saying this because I don't particularly agree that the people who make a good living don't deserve a raise. I'm not saying reduces to zero. I have advocated for a while for those hard to fill positions where percentages don't move the needle, to try to do something else. And so there's some wisdom in waiting to see what we get. It might not be 4%, and so waiting to see what we get and then figure out how to allocate it after it becomes clear. We might not know. When's the meeting in June? Will we have a board meeting
Yeah.
in between?
Well, remember last year, we actually had special called meeting based on county government's decision.
Yeah, we'll probably have that again too, but at that meeting, then we can.
Yeah, and I will tell you also, from a county government perspective, we may have a feel about where they're headed based on some of their committee meetings as well, that we'll keep you updated on. But, and also, there have been times where we've had a reduced raise or smaller percentage for different positions and stacked it. I will tell you what we had talked about in our leadership team, given county government's proposal, was to parallel what they were proposing, but you all do have that discretion to make some adjustments. I'm still, I'm not optimistic yet about county government, right? It's gonna be a hard conversation. But I think there's some wisdom in asking the question now as well.
Well, and I also just want to say that I did check the TSBA database. We went from 27th in the state in teacher pay to 11th. So we're now 11th. We got 10 more to go.
Yeah, that's right. And we have been making some good progress. And I will say also, given that our per pupil expenditure hovers around the 50th percentile, and I think we may have crept up maybe just a tiny bit above the 50th, it has jumped the teachers to 11th, we're putting our money in the classroom, y'all. If we're hovering around 50th percentile and our teacher pays at 11th in the state out of 140, depending on how they count them, 148, we're putting our money there in the classroom. Yeah, Vicki?
I just want to flag for y'all, in case you've forgotten it, that we do have an open salary evaluation going on now with Lean Frog. So just a reminder of that, because I suspect they're going to have some recommendations for us.
It won't hit this budget year.
It won't hit this budget year, and I don't want to say that that's only a drop in the bucket for what they're going to do, but I do want to say I want us to be intentional about changes we make on the chart, or for y'all to think about that when you do that, because I do think they'll have recommendations for us, and we want to be careful about getting into spots where we might have compression or different issues like that.
Okay, we ready to move on past general purpose school fund? All right, cafeteria fund?
Central cafeteria is the next fund. Again, you'll see that beginning, look, I turned my page ahead. in the, around 48, I believe, yeah, page 48 is the summary for them, and that's what you see on your screen in front of you. They do not have a projected gap at this time. Included in the packet is the proposed fees, and there were no changes to the fees for cafeteria. And then the detail is behind it. But again, they are self-funded, and so there is no gap. They would not have an issue being able to balance their budget.
And I want to honor some comments Mr. Galbraith has made over the course of years since officially this is your last budget discussion. That's not really the reason, but Central Cafeteria Fund is usually in the black versus in the red, largely because of a la carte purchases. And we've taken some steps really to increase parent decision-making and parent control over those a la carte purchases over the years. In part because of what we've heard from the board over the years. So I just wanted to make sure we mentioned that. On the payroll side, Ms. Hall, I know that there's a lot of discussion related to cafeteria staff pay in the context of the entire staff's pay. And so when we have discussions about pay increases for them, our HR department does compare it to other part-time positions, and so there is a discussion to make sure that there's an appropriate comparison between those two. But in that context, we will have some more discussion about our part-time cafeteria staff, in part because of the turnover.
Any questions on cafeteria? If not, we will move on to the extended school. There is a typo on this slide, y'all, and I am seeing it. I have looked at these slides 100 times, and I'm reading it off, and it says a program. This is killing me, y'all. Okay, so the extended school program, also known as SAC for us, so ignore that. Again, for them, also self-funded, and they would be able to cover their budget as well. There would be no gap for them. They would, I mean, both cafeteria, all three funds use fund balance to balance the budget. What happens a lot of times in all of these is that revenue, the expenditures, we're estimating, so the revenue comes in a little bit better than expenditures, and you don't really, but they would be fine in order to cover. There was a few little changes in their fees, but it was mostly related to late registrations to just try to help alleviate changes, last minute things that they can't prepare for.
So no county tax money is used to fund cafeteria. We do receive some federal. There is no tax money of any source for our school-age child care program, our extended school program.
Correct.
It is exclusively user-funded.
Correct. Any questions on the extended school program? And then the last section that you'll look at is annual capital, our annual capital request. And so what you will see on that summary sheet is last year's information. I just like to provide that so you have something to compare to. So last year we requested $14.1 million, and the commission did approve that $14.1 million. This year we're asking for $13.6. Why is it broken down? Covered this many times between general and rural is because FSD is K-8 and they are within the county, and so we have to differentiate our money between the two types, K-8 versus high school, and so that's general and rural. But the requests are there, and you have detail in your packet behind it that will list out each school where projects are being proposed. So if you have any questions about that, please do not hesitate to ask.
I will tell you, from a county commission perspective and the work I've done with the county commission, even predating my being the superintendent when I was the deputy superintendent, there are some years when they will fully fund this, and then there are some years when they won't. And so we walk through that process with them every year. That's driven by some of their other issues related to bond schedules, et cetera, as they're making decisions. So if I'm not mistaken, Brian, last year they did Did they fully fund our capital last year?
They fully funded
did
last
fully
year. They
fund it
didn't the year
last
before that. They cut
Yeah.
3
Okay,
million.
so 2 years ago, they didn't. Last year, they did.
The last thing I just want to share with you, and it's in your packet as well, are the dates coming up. So March 30th, assuming you all will approve a budget, next week, we would meet with the Joint Budget and Education Committee on March 30th, and then individually with Education on the 27th, Budget on the 28th. The commission as a whole will vote on the entire budget on June 18th, the morning at 9 a.m. So just keep those dates in mind. Lydia has said she will be glad to send calendar invites for these, if any of y'all would like to have those, just so that you have them on your calendar. No, I do think that when we show up and we represent Williamson County schools, that it has an effect. I mean, it does show the interest of the group, and so we would love to have anybody there that would like to be there.
And I will add this as well. Many of you do this. Talk to your commissioners from your districts as well, and let them know when you get those opportunities about what we've cut. We have done what Mayor Anderson has asked of his departments and more. And so I think it's important to emphasize that because we recognize the challenges they face as well. They do fund 2/3 of our budget, and so they are doing a lot for us. And you know, it's a matter of that tight, finding a way to just keep up.
Okay, any more questions on budget before we leave that? All right, thank you again. Okay, we've got a couple of board policies for first reading. I don't think Dana's here.
She's not, Mr. Chair. Dana's out. I
So
will
do you
take
want
it.
to
Yes,
handle
sir.
that?
So the first policy before you is a new member orientation, some recommended changes. I want to thank Ms. Clemens for bringing that. You have her form in there as well. So there's a pretty good discussion that actually predated me arriving at the meeting because I was at a county commission budget meeting. And so you see some proposed changes. I very much like the idea of having a revamped new board member orientation process. It's some of what I'm visualizing are making sure that you have those new board members have those opportunities to talk with different departments. I know Mr. Cash made a comment about TSBA and those things that you get. Well, the vision that we've had for the new board member orientation, knowing that those TSBA trainings happen over the course of time, is to make sure that those board members know those things you've got to know on the front end, you know, just to protect you and to have a visual of where you're headed. I will also say this. I want to make sure that every board member knows, every new board member knows that I don't think that there's an expectation that they just sit for a blank number of months and just listen. I think it's wise to ask questions because the question that a new board member may ask may not have been answered for a sitting board member. So there's wisdom in asking the questions. And I think our teachers do the same thing in their classrooms. So I just felt like it was important for me to mention that. But there's first reading. You all will be revisiting this in second reading if you approve that at the Monday meeting.
Okay, then code of conduct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Second, the code of conduct, there's some discussion. You can see on the first page just a restatement and an improvement in that one paragraph on that first page with respect to mediation or restorative conferences. On page 2, there's a proposed change that would move leaving campus without permission or urging other students to engage in skipping class, move that up to the next level of discipline. So if you have any questions about that, certainly open to them. But again, that will go back for second reading as well.
Can I throw out the idea of these two going on consent agenda for Monday night on first reading? Is any objection to that? Okay. So
All right, thank you. We'll make that
those to
change.
consent. All right. right, next item is approval of high school courses and special course applications.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is one of the items on our annual agenda for this month. It includes proposals for our high school courses, plus if we have any special courses. This year, we do not have any special courses to present to you. Dr. Allen and his team have prepared the proposed list of high school courses. I do want to point out some of the highlights in that document. That includes some adjustments to honors versus standard courses. Dr. Allen, is there any detail you'd like to share with the board?
Nope. Specifically 3 changes. I'll just make sure that I highlight those 3 changes. Moving theater arts 3 and 4 to honors. We have vetted the course content and determined it to be honors level. Moving coding 2 to honors, we've done the same thing. And then we have historically taught abnormal psychology. That is a special course that has to be approved through the state. So we're just simply running that through a renewal process at the state. That's the only changes from last year's course codes.
Last item I want to mention related to this, the Innovation Center courses were approved last year. So aviation is an example. Those are already on our docket because students have already started the enrollment process.
And like clarification, what is Game Studies Seminar?
Game Studies Seminar.
It would be game theory as opposed to computer logic.
Okay.
So understanding how to impart code into the computer gaming industry, which we do have a class
Yeah.
at.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more on that? All right, our final item is the approval of the Health and Career and Technical Education Textbook Adoption Committee recommendation. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to give you a presentation. I'm sure you recall these last few months we've been giving you presentations related to the process and the substance of the work that's being done related to some of our CTE courses, CCTE courses, and health and PE textbooks. Jen Sauer's been presenting that. Because this is a voting item this time, she's not presenting at the superintendent's report. She's presenting to you now to share with you the conclusions, the recommendations from teachers, and the recommendations from the committee related to that textbook adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Golden, and thank you, board.
If I may, Mr. Brown just stepped out, and we've been asked if we could take a break before Jen presents.
I think that's a brilliant idea.
Okay. I don't officially have authority, but let's take a 6-minute break.
bit of preface for you. I am here to give you the final recommendations out of the textbook adoption process for this year. And as a reminder, 2 of the changes that were made to the board policy around textbook selection that we're going to talk about tonight in the form of this presentation is that, number 1, when teachers and then the committee make those recommendations, they're no longer just selecting what is the resource that they're recommending, they're providing their reasoning or rationale behind that recommendation. So back before spring break, you received from me a packet of what is every single comment that we received from every committee member. I'm not going to put every one of those comments up on the slides. I think that would be a long time for us to go through and probably hard to read. So I did want to make sure that you had it in print form. But what we're going to look at on the slides are some summaries of comments that came out of that. No, you're fine. No, it's just textbook, I think, is the first word. I can check on my computer if you want me to. Do you want me to look? It's called textbook adoption, BOE. Perfect. There it is. Okay, so as a quick reminder, the work that's happened since the last time that we were together, the teachers did make their recommendation to the textbook committee for a preferred resource via an electronic form. That teacher recommendation data was captured and aggregated by school. The textbook adoption committee members were provided the teacher recommendation data for their school. They also received district data, and then the community members don't represent a single school, so they receive that aggregate district data. The textbook adoption committee members then made their final recommendation to the school board for your final vote and approval. So we're going to kind of go through course by course and talk about what were the major findings of the committee. So I believe that my presentation follows along with that packet that you got just in condensed form for you. So the first course we'll look at is middle school health and PE. As a reminder, we had 4 different resources up for consideration. All 4 of those resources were new to Williamson County, so none of those are ones that we're using currently. Also, as a reminder, the state did not vet middle school health and PE resources. This was the teachers in our district said they also felt like they needed a middle school resource, so we pulled those as part of our adoption, but the state did not do any vetting of those resources. That comment at the bottom is going to show up on all the slides. Remember that in your packet, you have same information about what was the selection data, what is the current textbook used by the course when there is one, and then what's the reasoning or rationale submitted by the textbook committee. For this resource, the major findings of the committee, what was the reason that they recommended? Actually, I should probably go back and talk about what was the resource that they recommended. So you'll see that the overwhelming selection of both the teachers and of the committee was Essential Health Skills for Middle School, published by Goodhart Wilcox. Their reasoning included, number 1, strong alignment to standards and district priorities, so closely aligned with Tennessee state standards. That was actually not a given in that middle school resource. So remember that everything else goes through the state vetting. That would ensure that alignment to standards. The middle school did not, so that was a big piece of what they were analyzing. And also with district learning goals, accurate and current content that supports required instruction, Comprehensive teacher support, so robust teacher resources, including pacing guides, instructional materials, and professional development, supporting effective and consistent implementation. And then engaging, differentiated, and real-world learning. Supports diverse learners through differentiation, multiple languages, and ESL supports, real-world, hands-on activities that increase student engagement and relevance. There are questions about that resource before we go on to the next one? Yeah?
I see multiple languages.
Yes.
Besides English and Spanish, are there other languages that we...
I'd have to double check with that particular resource. Many of the resources that we looked at did have the ability to translate into multiple languages, not just English and Spanish. Okay, for high school lifetime wellness, again, you'll see that the overwhelming selection of both teachers in the committee was that Essential Health High School version, also from Goodhart Wilcox. And again, all of these resources are new for Williamson County. You'll see that the teacher comments are similar but not the same. So again, that alignment to Tennessee standards came up as a piece of the conversation. And you'll see that in this case, what the mention is that it's best aligned to Tennessee standards. So we've talked about before that in the state vetting process, they are confirming that all standards are addressed. They don't necessarily confirm the depth of the standards being addressed. So part of what the textbook committee looks at is not just can we find the standard, but do we really feel like this is a good resource to fully address those standards as we need to instruct on them. Again, they looked at that accurate, current, and adaptable content. And again, that teacher support came up. So I think actually, interestingly, in the context of the conversations we had earlier, we've heard a lot in a lot of different contexts around how our teachers are often coming in with not the background in teaching. And so having those teacher support has been important to our teachers as they're selecting instructional materials. Any questions about this one? Okay, we're going to move into the CTE courses. These become a whole lot more narrow. So you'll see that the number of teachers that teach these courses are often, well, I think every single one is going to be in single digits. In some cases, you're going to see one teacher who teaches the courses. So this is a very small adoption for us. But for Coding 1, the selection was Tennessee Coding 1, which is through CodeHS. CodeHS is a product that our teachers are familiar with. We use it in several different computer science courses throughout the district. So often the teachers of these courses are teaching multiple courses. So while they may or may not have used CodeHS for this particular course, they're very familiar with the product. For Computer Science Foundations, the choice was Tennessee Computer Science Foundations, CodeHS. And for Cybersecurity 1, Tennessee Cybersecurity 1, CodeHS. You'll see that their reasoning is a little bit different than what Health and PE is looking for, because they're thinking about how are we using this resource in that information technology setting. They're still talking about that standards aligned computer science program, but you'll see that they're calling out some specific things. So it supports all of our currently taught programming languages. It offers both introductory and advanced coursework. Again, it is aligned with state standards. It's regularly updated to keep pace with changes in technology. That's a big piece for the information technology group. I know that they were talking about how quickly IT changes in the course of an 8-year adoption, and so a curriculum that is flexible, that's able to keep up with those changes, was important to them. They also mentioned that teacher support and instructional tools, and again, that idea of engaging in student-centered learning. So they talked about project-based, real-world learning with built-in differentiation, again, for those advanced learners, special ed students, and English language learners. Okay, we're going to move into the mechatronics courses. I will tell you that every mechatronics course is taught by a single teacher in the district. So when we talk about a narrow adoption, this is a narrow adoption. But the mechatronics course sequence begins here with digital electronics. So digital electronics, the choice was electricity and electronics, which is by Goodhart Wilcox. That is the current book, but an older version that they use for this particular course. Again, this is a cluster of courses that nothing passed state vetting. So this was, again, us reaching out to publishers and saying, hey, what do you have to support this course? For Mechatronics 1, we were only able to find one resource that we felt might potentially meet the course. We did have 2 to review for Mechatronics 2. So for Mechatronics 1, the choice was industrial maintenance and mechatronics. And for Mechatronics 2, the choice was programmable logic controllers, hardware and programming by Goodhart Wilcox. And again, some of the things that the teachers and then the committee mentioned, alignment to standards, again, came out as something that was really important. And then it starts talking about some of the content-specific pieces. So that precision exam materials, ensuring alignment between instruction and assessment, strong hands-on real-world focus again, and then rigor and depth of content. So in some of those courses, we were kind of comparing, here are 2 resources that could potentially meet the needs of the course. The ones that were selected is the ones that stood out as more advanced and more rigorous than the other options that they were reviewing. All right. Now we're moving into the engineering side of this CTE cluster. So the first course is Principles of Engineering and Technology, which is kind of the introductory course. The choice of the teacher and the committee was Foundations of Engineering and Technology by Goodhart Wilcox. These are, again, all new resources for Williamson County, so we don't use any of these currently. And then for Engineering Design 1 and Engineering Design 2, for Engineering Design 1, there were 2 resources that passed state vetting. The choice of the teachers was, and of the committee, was ICEV STEM Site Engineering Design 1, and that same course but different level was the only resource that passed for Engineering Design 2. So again, that was the selection. So ICEV STEM Site Engineering Design 2, again by CEV Multimedia. Some of the things that stood out in the teachers' comments, maybe some things that we would expect out of an engineering course. So again, they talked again about that alignment to standards and the required assessments, part of those CTE standards. But then they also mentioned the project-based learning that was incorporated, hands-on applications embedded throughout the curriculum. Projects are well integrated, increasingly complex, and aligned with real-world engineering practices and CTSO activities. Another mention that they talked about in the middle there is where it mentions it's providing both strong foundational concepts, but also supporting that progression to higher level thinking. All right, and then the final course that was up for adoption was the middle school STEM Explorers, Innovators, and Designers course. And again, there was only one resource that passed state vetting for those courses. So that was the selection. And the feedback that was provided, again, aligned to state standards. Strong teacher support also came up as a piece that was important to this group, and instructional guidance. And then it talked again about the interactive piece. So this is supporting interactive, hands-on learning experiences and also at an appropriate level for our middle school students. Emphasis on engagement and practical application of STEM concepts. Okay, any questions about any of that before we kind of talk a little bit about what will happen next?
I've actually got a couple of questions,
Sure.
just some things that I know came up here and there. Some of it's driven by some of the discussions we had earlier, and this may be a Dr. Allen or Jenny Lopez question as well. Talk a little bit about how we're driven by the standards first.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we talk with teachers about, this is actually part of our committee conversation from the very beginning. So I'll kind of take you back in time to probably the first time that I came and talked to you guys for this adoption cycle, is that Before we ever start evaluating resources, we begin with our committee by kind of setting the stage of what are we looking for in instructional resource. Evaluating of standards is always part of that. We keep our standards as the center of our instruction. What our guidance to teachers now becomes, so now that we have chosen, or moving to the stage where we have chosen an instructional resource, what the work of our curriculum specialists will be is to take the adopted resource and align it to the state standards. It is, I want to say, universally true. I think there maybe is a time where there's an exception. Elementary might be more of an exception than secondary. Instructional materials will very, very often contain material that is outside of the standard. We talk about it beyond the scope of the course. And so it's important for teachers to have that scope and sequence as the guiding document to say, hey, we never provide as guidance, pick up the resource, start on page 1, and just teach through until the end. Instead, what we do is say, start with your standard, truly unpack that standard to know what is it that students need to know and be able to do. And then we go to the instructional resource to pull out what are the lessons that are in that instructional resource that address the standard. There are often things that are in an instructional resource that our teachers and students are just not going to use because they're not part of the standard. The flip side of that is occasionally we find we have to supplement. We say, actually, the standard says we need to be able to do this, and we need supplemental materials because while the resource addresses the standard, it's not to the full depth and breadth.
And related to that, there was some discussion about classroom sets in a different context. What do you all anticipate from a purchasing standpoint with health and these CTE courses?
That's a great question. I can definitely say for health and PE, I have Tansy Rayner, who's our curriculum specialist for health and PE, is here. She and I have been talking extensively last year leading up to this adoption and then again in this year. Our teachers have strongly indicated that in health and PE, both in the middle school and high school level, we don't see any need for students to have a one-on-one resource. It's not, that resource is gonna have so much material in it that the students are just not gonna be using to address the standards. The teachers have pretty universally said, what we really need is a teacher's guide. We as a teacher can pull out the resources that we need to use for classroom instruction. The students don't need that textbook on a one-to-one basis. CTE, we're going to have to talk about course by course once we have the final selection. And sometimes that's what happens as well. So Chris Cooper and I will have to sit down together and kind of go course by course and say, okay, for this course, what do we think we need? For this course, what do we think we need? I'll give you some examples. I would say it's very likely for a course like Coding 1, a student is going to need to have full access to the platform. A course like the middle school STEM courses, the teachers have already said to me, we do not need this for one-to-one with our students. We can use it as a resource to create those lessons for our students. We don't need that for the students to have as one-to-one. Okay. All right, so the next thing that will happen, we are asking that in March, this is put to the final vote and approval. Once the list is approved, we publish the list on our website. We do order those textbook and instructional materials as soon as we can for those that we are ordering sets for students so that, again, we can get in that front of the line if it's possible to try and ensure that our students have things on time. And then we immediately begin our implementation plans. So that's when our specialists sit down with groups of teachers, they work through those scope and sequences, and at the same time, we're working with publishers to set up training plans for our teachers so that they're ready to implement those resources. Okay? That's what I have. There's the summary of the list. Does anybody have anything final for me?
Give you one additional reminder, FYI, in your packet includes all the comments, correct?
Every single comment.
Unedited.
Friends, misspellings and all.
That's right.
We felt it was really important for you to know that we really are passing on unedited comments for you. And so you are going to find a couple of typos. Just as you read my emails, you might find a typo every now and again. And we really wanted you to just have, here's the raw words of our teachers so that you can see it. All right,
Jen,
thank you.
Thank you very
For
much.
1
Any
second.
questions for,
Yeah, good question. Jen, I just noticed on the coding, Code HS, one of the comments was, hey, we use this now, and and it spits out bad information, and it makes some of the functionality not useful. What were the other teachers' comments around that? Like, I guess because everybody saw the same feedback. Is that a common thing? Like, or it might just be I don't know. You just want
Let's try again. That comment is the only one that I heard around that. Chris Cooper may have heard other things from teachers. It's not something that I heard universally, and I think it is. I can't speak for that individual teacher's experience. I can say that if I go out and ask any 10 teachers what has been your experience with a particular platform, somebody's going to have had a really good experience, somebody's going to have a not as good experience. It did come across pretty clearly that one teacher has not had a good experience with that platform, but it does sound to me, and in conversations with the other teachers, that that wasn't a universal feeling. And I can say for Code HS in general, this is it might be a little more detailed, so I'm sorry if I'm getting deep in the weeds of something that's a little bit confusing. It's actually confusing to us. There is a Computer Science Foundations course that every student in high school takes as a graduation requirement. That is not this course, which is real confusing because it's also called Computer Science Foundations. They also use Code HS in that course. It is pretty universally appreciated by the teachers who teach that course. So while that is not reflected here, I can just say anecdotally, the teachers who use Code HS for that Computer Science Foundations course that's different than this one, they've had pretty good experience with the platform. They seem to like it. They've been using it for about 2 or 3 years now, and they haven't asked us to change it at all. So again, one person is always going to have some feelings. I don't want to discount that at all. I haven't seen it as a universal feeling. Chris, do you have anything else you want to say about that? Okay. Okay, anything else?
Anyone? Thank you,
All
Jen.
right, thank you.
Thanks for all your work. All right, any questions on that? We will be, as everyone knows, voting on Monday night on whether to approve that committee recommendation. Yeah.
Will we vote for like each individual book, or are we voting on them all 12, or?
That's a good question. Do we take them as a whole, or do we take them individually? I can't recall.
Right now, we actually have it as an agenda item. My suggestion would be if you all would like to vote for them separately, we can break those up into separate ones. But right now, it's one vote.
So would that just be it's like pulling something off of like a consent agenda? If anybody wants to break any one of them out separately, we just then you do that prior to the meeting.
We'll assume we vote as a package, and if someone wants to pull one out separately, we can do that.
And I would re-invite you all to ask us questions, not just on this, if anything comes up before Monday, but also on the budget. We're still open to any questions. And if there's any request to break this out, we will.
Okay. All right, anything else for the good of the order? Okay, we're adjourned.